All aboard and welcome to a new episode of Animation Station. I am your conductor, Sparkz Witty. I am back for that one brief episode where I wasn't here, and we won't speak of it anymore, and that's the end of that. And I am joined, of course, by the rapscallions who stole my show on that previous episode, Brandon T. McClure.
I got nothing.
And Ben Magnet.
I don't think I've ever been called a rapscallion before, but I kind of like it.
See, there you go. And that's all we'll ever say about Earthrise, except for the fact that this is an episode all about Transformers War for Cybertron Kingdom, but also Transformers War for Cybertron, the trilogy. So I guess we kind of have to talk about Earthrise.
Well, I mean, certainly you do, because
certainly I do. And certainly I have to talk about what you guys talked about. Sure. And I have to say, like, you guys are full of shit and things like that. No, I'm happy to be here. We're gonna do the whole thing. We're gonna focus on Kingdom, but we're gonna talk about the whole thing because it's over now.
Yeah,
and we can talk about it all. And I have a lot of thoughts. I have so many thoughts. Brandon has a vague idea of how many thoughts I have. I will quickly give a rundown of what happened to me, which is that I watched Earthrise and I watched Kingdom. And partway through watching Kingdom, I downloaded every podcast episode of a podcast called All Things Transformers related to this show, as well as every podcast episode of another podcast called Transmissions, which is also a Transformers-based podcast about this show, including their episodes where they interviewed for each season the creator, the showrunner, and the producer. Which the showrunner is F.J. DeSanto and the producer is Matt Murray. And they were interviewed for... DeSanto was interviewed only for Siege. He was the only one for Siege, but then they were both interviewed for Earthrise and Kingdom. Mm-hmm. And then I also listened to the one that was an interview with May Cat and Tim Sheridan, who were the writers of Kingdom.
Tim Sheridan, he's a comic book writer.
And he's one of the writers for Kingdom.
I didn't know that.
He and May Cat were the only two writers for Kingdom.
Oh wow! Wait, what?
Yeah,
there were only two people who wrote.
And I honestly have to Google the names for you. But so Tim Sheridan wrote Earthrise with another writer who was a writer who came from Siege, that he did with another writer, and then May Cat only came on for Kingdom. So there were two writers per season, and one of them alternated from the previous season each time.
I'm not going to say that explains a lot, but in a vague way.
A lot of things I learned from those episodes explains a lot, and we will get into it. But first...
You like how Ben's hair is blowing in the wind?
Yeah, but first...
That's why.
Before all that, just let's some temperature checks. I want to get some temperature checks.
Okay.
On how you guys feel overall about Kingdom.
Just Kingdom.
Yeah, I think... I think the best way to do this is probably to talk about Kingdom first, and then work our way back. I'll bring up what I think about Earthrise and things as we talk about the trilogy.
Right. Ben, why don't you go first on this one?
I think with a lot of the transfer, because when we talked about Siege and when we did Earthrise, I was pretty warm on both of them. This one I'm kind of less warm because I really enjoyed Earthrise. What?
I'm just so happy because I knew this was gonna be. I'm okay with it. I'm totally like, I'm not digging at you. I just anticipated this would be the take, which I'm happy about.
Yeah, Earthrise definitely was, because Siege was, because I thought Siege was good, and then you guys kind of, the more I thought about it, I was like, okay, it wasn't that good. Earthrise rose the bar up a little bit higher, which I was like, okay, hey, this show's got some promise to it. I kind of like what we're dealing with here. And then with Kingdom, it felt, I don't know, it just I mean, I did watch the entire series in one go again, but just, it wasn't like, I was like, how are they going to do all this other stuff that I know that is going to happen? Oh, that's how they're doing it? Okay, I guess.
Okay. I don't disagree with what Ben is saying.
Okay.
I'm a little lukewarm on Kingdom.
Oh my God, I'm so here for this. I love it.
I did end up, I watched Siege. I didn't watch Siege twice. Siege is fine. I watched Earthrise twice. I enjoyed Earthrise. I think Earthrise is okay. This one was. I was very confused for most of it.
Sure. Okay.
And I wasn't quite sure. It wasn't necessarily that I thought like we were building to something, but I definitely thought we were. I definitely thought there was a direction that the show was just kind of like, oh, a direction? What's that?
I think there was this. There was a direction, and then they kind of lost their way in the middle of it. It's like, oh shit, we gotta add X, Y, and Z, and so
it all comes to, I think, something that you've talked about on Siege, and I'm sure continued throughout the series. Optimus throwing the Allspark off of the planet, off of Cybertron.
Okay, yeah. So like that's definitely going to be like one of the main focus for sure.
The thing is, I like the idea in Earthrise. We talked about Earthrise. Check out our episode on Earthrise. I talked about a lot of this already. I like the idea that Optimus is remorseful for it. He's like, yeah, I did this. It was a mistake, whatever. But Kingdom is just... Kingdom is just, we got to get the Allspark. The Allspark's dying. Optimus is, it's my fault. And everyone's like, no, Optimus. It's not your fault.
Okay, but that was happening in Earthrise too.
But not as much, because Optimus was like wasn't buying it. And I was kind of okay with. I'm not saying it's not.
No, I get you. I get you.
I'm just saying it was less.
Yeah.
This one was very much. This one was very much the most blatant time where the showrunners were like, "Yeah, Optimus from the TV show, right?"
Yeah.
We're not showing Optimus as he is now in this. We're like Optimus from the TV show, right?
Optimus is like a whole topic related to the trilogy I want to get into, so I'm not going to dive too hard on that right now.
We're just going to change the background. Boom.
Oh, don't you want to change it to Kingdom?
Boom.
There we go. Perfect. Thank you. Jesus.
I was like,
oops.
Okay, so I really want to say this as accurately as I can. I am the most hot on Kingdom of the three.
Okay.
However, I still feel like the whole thing as in general is a bit of a miss.
Sure, yeah.
For me. Kingdom is my favorite, perhaps because it is the most clear with the character arcs I care about. Mm-hmm. Because I went into Kingdom already not caring about Optimus. So the fact that Optimus's arc in this sucks doesn't mean anything to me because I already wrote him off.
Sure.
I wrote him off halfway through Earthrise. And to be honest, I'd written him off after Siege, but I tried to like restart it when I started Earthrise.
Yeah.
No. I think there's a lot of elements in Kingdom that are strong for me that given listening to other Transformers podcasts where all they do is eat, sleep, and breathe Transformers, they really hate this season. Which is why I was like, I think Ben's probably not gonna like this one. But a lot of it comes down to like preconceived ideas of who characters should be.
Sure.
The most prominent is Predacon Megatron. But there are others.
Say that 5 times fast.
And I have no connection to any of them.
Yeah.
I have no connection to like my Transformers knowledge is a chunk of G1, a decent chunk, like 15, 20 episodes of G1.
Yeah.
Reasonable. Maybe 2 or 3 episodes of Beast Wars when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
A chunk of animated.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
And a chunk of a pretty sizable chunk of Prime. But none of them did I go all the way through.
Yeah.
And then the live action movies.
Should finish Prime.
Maybe. I will say, like, coming out of this, what I want out of Transformers storytelling, it feels like where I need to go right now is the comics.
Oh yeah, it's not Prime.
Where I'm gonna get what I want, I need to go to the comics, and that's okay. I'm going to because I can't do this anymore. But I did notice that like for people who are so steeped in the Transformers stuff, that there's just a lot of like there's already so much association of like familiarity with these characters, even though these are reinventions, that like a lot of things were either problematic to them that like I didn't even think about because I didn't give a crap about it already. So I'm like, that's not even a factor into why this show is either succeeding or failing. Or they're really, really pleased with something that's like a callback, and I'm like, could not care less.
Yeah.
Could not care less. This happened a lot with the Beast Wars characters, from what I understand.
Well,
in both directions.
Right. The thing about this season, the kind of the hyping point for myself, and I'm sure other Transformers fans, so this is really the first time in the more mainstream. I know they showed up in the Machinima series. I don't know how much they did, but
my understanding is minimal.
Yeah, this is really the first time that they've ever played a big role since the original show.
For the 25th anniversary,
yeah,
we should say, for Beast Wars.
Oh yeah,
that's this year.
Is it really?
Yeah, that was a big reason why Hasbro wanted to push the toy line.
Oh yeah, it makes sense.
So another thing is like Ben, I do want to bring this up now. Like the showrunner DeSanto was very clear in the interviews that about how the show is made is that Hasbro makes the toys and the show's story follows suit, to the degree where, because the show was an 18 episode series, what happened is that they were told what toys to use, but those toys were only from like the first wave or two at best. So that's why, like, you guys talked about the Triceratops figure.
The skeleton Triceratops.
Yes, that's not in Kingdom. That's because Hasbro made that a toy in the wave after the show was already in final stages of animation for the third season. So like, their characters that they would have loved to have, they were told they weren't going to have access to them. And then Hasbro decided, oh no, actually we are going to make a toy of them. So that was such a limit on the story they could tell. And so like, while I do want to say like, there's definitely from those interviews I can glean showrunner choices and writer choices that are problems with why I don't like the show. Things that I don't like in it. However, the biggest thing is the fact that Hasbro structures Transformers properties, and it's not just a show, it's any show that they're making, as how do we sell a toy first, build something around that, and they hamstring the storytellers. The best example of this is that they were very clear that they wanted Elita 1 to transform. They were told that they could not because Hasbro was unwilling to give the amount of budget for the animation for the transformation because they were like, we're not going to make a toy of Elita 1. Okay. Season 1 comes out and Elita 1's a really popular character. And then Hasbro's like, we are going to make a toy of her. Too late. Show's done. Can't transform her now. It's over. That's specifically like the kind of example of why this kind of format of storytelling is problematic.
Yeah. The thing about this, now I watched Beast Wars and Beast Machines as a kid, but I don't have a familiarity with them because I haven't seen that show in 25 years almost. So like that possible I was 5.
So some 20 years.
Yeah, some 20 years. And so like seeing these different characters, seeing this different thing, like characters, I'm kind of into this new reinvention of them. For example, in the original Beast Machines, it's a handful of Predacons and Maximals that end up on Earth. Whereas in this, it's implied that stated that there was an army of Predacons and Maximals on Earth, and these are just what's left.
Some 200 plus.
Yeah, and I think that's a really cool invention.
You see multiple Scorponok in a scene, and in the original Beast Wars, Scorponok was the second in command of the Predacons.
Buddy, if I never see another Scorponok in my life, it'll be too soon. I'm so sick of Scorponok.
You know what? I kind of feel like I'm also sick of Scorponok. Like
I have no strong feelings about Scorponok.
Like, we saw him for 4 episodes in the second season, and then there's a lot of them, but they're a different Scorponok. And I hate them.
And not only that, there's like 20 of them in one, or like there's like 5 of them. It's like, how is there multiple Scorponoks and they're silent the whole time? It's like, yeah, because it's one of those things
grunts. He need grunts.
Yeah, he just grunts. Whereas in the show, from what I do remember, because I do have very distinct memories of the original Beast Wars, is that there's an episode where his command was put into question by Megatron and Black Arachnia and a few other Predacons, and he's like, I am the second in command of the Predacons. If Megatron falls, I am trusted to lead us to victory. All of y'all suck. And he actually kind of gets some comeuppance at the end of that.
Did you just tell me that Scorponok was the second in command of that series?
He was.
Predacons?
He was.
I don't like Scorponok. I don't want to talk about Scorponok
okay. I mean,
anymore.
as a kid, I liked Scorponok because he was a giant scorpion, and I thought that was rad. But besides that, Scorponok sucks.
I like the reinvention of the Maximals and the Predacons. I like the idea. It's probably the thing I like the most in the season, which is that they came from a Cybertron where Optimus never came back with the Allspark, and they were sent back in time because Galvatron told Predacon Megatron to go back in time and find his past self. And I think that's a cool idea. That for me is the strongest part of the season.
I see that. I will counter Dinobot.
Dinobot's pretty cool.
Dinobot for me is the strongest part of the season.
Yeah, as far as character
possibly
goes.
The strongest part of the show, which I guess is no surprise to a lot of people because everyone in general is very happy with how Dinobot was handled in this. They thought it was a solid condensed version of his arc in Beast Wars.
Yeah, I remember his arc in Beast Wars.
Apparently large swaths of Transformers fandom consider this primary episode called Code of Honor, I think, as the best episode of Transformers media, period, which is all about Dinobot's redemption.
Yeah, cool.
So in general, people seem very pleased with how Dinobot was treated in this show, how they handled his arc in a small amount of time, but made it land.
Yeah. I think all that's really cool, and I think that works.
I really like Dinobot.
Yeah. I also really like, as far as character wise, I think Dinobot is the strongest. But as far as the Maximals and Predacon stuff, I like the idea that Optimus Primal is distrustful of Optimus Prime at first because he thinks he's Nemesis Prime. I like the fact that Predacon Megatron is so determined to change Megatron's fate because of the threat that Galvatron and Unicron posed in the future.
Yes, I really love the line where Dinobot tells him, I understand what you're trying to do. You think you can save him. Yeah. You think you can stop him before but he's too far gone.
And I think that's awesome.
And I'm like, this is maybe the best line in this show.
Yeah, I think that's so good. I'm so into that stuff. The Autobots, the Decepticons, except for Starscream, surprisingly, I found were pretty lacking.
I would push back on. I think Megatron's still solid.
Yeah. I was going to say Megatron. I mean, the Dinobot stuff. I was bummed when obviously, I don't know if we said it earlier. Spoilers for Kingdom, but when Dinobot,
you should know what you're getting into at this point, guys.
Yeah, but when Dinobot dies, at first I'm like, oh no, but then I was like, actually, that's pretty good because I remember him actually dying in the original Beast Wars.
When he's a ghost. And Optimus Primal is like, there's no such thing as ghost. What is this? Because he's never heard, because he doesn't have any interaction with the Allspark, so he doesn't know what a spark is necessarily, and so he's
and so all the Allspark illusion stuff had been happening.
Yeah,
that shit. Was dumb.
The Allspark illusion stuff.
Yes, it was just distracting filler bullshit in a 6-episode season.
I agree.
It served no purpose.
Yeah, like Scorponok in season 2.
Somehow these Siege didn't have this problem. No, Siege was too short. That was Siege's only problem. It was just too short. These seasons somehow find a way to fill themselves with BS I don't need to think about or care about.
You can condense these 2 seasons pretty competently. You
could, and yet I would also argue that they should have more episodes. Just actually paying attention. So here's a big, this is a wide swath problem, I would say, of the whole trilogy. I think thinking back and having listened to I also listened to your guys' Earthrise discussion. I listened to our original Fake Nerd podcast discussion about Siege, where if you go back and listen to it, I am very agitated by Siege. And I get it. I get why. And I don't regret or take back anything I said about Siege. I think all those points were super, super valid. I think that the big thing is that I am more new to Transformers media.
Right.
And as far as shows, and I didn't think about the fact that this is the most of that kind of thing I was wanting that we've ever had to begin with. And I'm like, there's an amount of you should just be grateful they're even playing in this space at all. And I'm like, yeah, I guess kind of.
Well, they never really have in this type of medium.
Right. But I'm like, you introduce all this interesting class stuff. and I want that explored. But Siege, at least, what I do think Siege did well is I cared about and recognized and knew the Autobots and Decepticons on both sides of what was happening throughout that season.
Right.
Earthrise and Kingdom, I recognize Optimus, Bumblebee, Megatron, Starscream, Shockwave, Cog.
Well, Cog's dead in season 2.
Scorponok. No, I'm saying between Earthrise and Kingdom.
Right.
And then Optimus Primal and Predacon Megatron, Dinobot, Black Arachnia. And then I don't know who anybody else is. And I couldn't name them. I couldn't tell you what they're about. I see them. I mean, like, I guess I know who Ratchet is. Fine. He's not really a character in the show, though.
You've seen Michael
I
Bay's.
know who Ratchet is. I see Ratchet. Ratchet's not a character in this show. No. In seasons 2 and 3. God. In seasons 2 and 3. In Siege, he was.
You told me about Astro Train.
Yeah, Astro Train
in this season.
Astro Train is in Kingdom for like all of 25 seconds, and the only reason I know that is because I was watching the episode with subtitles on.
Astro Train is in this season,
and I'm like, I don't know who that is.
And it's
yes, exactly, Ben.
He's actually in it quite a bit because he pops up sporadically throughout the season.
But this is so. My point with this is just like, as a lot of like people have talked about this show, so many people have different opinions about this, and like that it's designed to please the fans of right. G1 and of Beast Wars. And then there are others who are saying like this is just a great jumping on point for people who don't know Transformers. And I want to counter that and say, not really. No, not really. It's not a great jumping on point because I don't know who anybody is. Mm-hmm. Like all these people are talking about in like the discussions around the fandom, they're talking about, oh, they did Tigertron not very well, and I'm like, how could you tell? Did they talk? And like that's where I'm like, I don't know who that is. Like I know it's the one that turns into a tiger, but I don't know.
Tigertron had a some sort of relationship with Airazor.
Sure.
And so did Black Arachnia.
Sure.
I like that. Okay, like I want to say something about the designs real quickly.
Yeah.
I think the Transformers look. I think the G1 Transformers look great. So I like their designs. They look like G1 stuff. I'm into it. I was worried about the Maximals and the Predacons in this animation. Now, while I don't think all of their beast designs work in this animation, I like all of their they're like robot designs. I like how sleek they are. I like how futuristic they all look. I think like they look they're noticeably different from the G1s, like they are in fact later models. I think that's all really cool.
That's okay, because my counter to that is that these are the same designs that we saw way back in the 90s, just touched up and look better than they did. Because
that's what do they look better?
They look a little. I mean, they're cleaner. It's not complete CGI.
Look. I think all the beast forms of the Maximals look like crap.
Oh yeah,
I think they look like crap. I think they look just as bad as old Beast Wars. And I watched a clip and I feel that way. Like, yeah, the animation is better technically because it's modern age, but it looks pretty much just as bad.
I'll agree with that. Yeah.
I don't care. Like, I think the dinosaurs transformations, the Predacons, they look fine.
I think Dinobot and Megatron look great.
Yeah, I think they look fine.
Yeah.
Dinobot,
every time the Maximals transform into their beast forms, I'm taking a little bit out of it.
Yeah.
I'm like, I just don't believe that.
I really liked, there's a line where Optimus Primal, it goes, Maximals, maximize, and that's what he said. That's his rollout.
I got that.
And everyone's like, I mean transform. I just thought that was funny.
Yeah, because back in the show, every time in Beast Wars, every time they would transform, they would say their name, and if you're a Maximal, you say Maximize. If you're a Predacon, you say Terrorize.
Terrorize. I was waiting for Megatron to say Terrorize, but there's not that many Predacons left in this universe.
There's not. There was another. I remember.
No, there's more. You just don't know them.
Oh, right, because there's so many Scorponok.
Yeah, there was another spider. From what I remember, there was another spider who was essentially the Starscream of Beast Wars.
No, you think about Waspinator.
No, he was a spider. There are two spiders. There's Black Arachnia and a guy who was a tarantula.
Tarantulas.
That's him.
Waspinator is a character,
I heard Tarantulas isn't in the show because I heard the Transformers podcast talk about those were two of the ones they were really mad weren't in the show was Waspinator and Tarantulas.
Wasn't Waspinator possessed by Starscream's ghost?
Yes.
Yes.
I never saw that episode, but I remember talking about it.
I know that because of the podcast.
Sure,
They
sure.
talked about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as far as like characterizations goes, we talked about Dinobot. We like Dinobot. I honestly like Black Arachnia.
I do too.
I think Black Arachnia and also Air Razor. I think both those characters come out well in the show.
I think Air Razor comes out okay. They don't truly feel like a character for me. They're like one step below being fully engaged.
Sure.
All of Air Razor's stuff feels like it's there just to serve Dinobot and Black Arachnia rather than anything that's actually,
especially Black Arachnia, am I right?
Rather than anything that's actually serving their own story. They're very much in like a hair raise above Ratchet,
Sure.
position for me.
Sure, I get that. I still like them.
I agree with you about Black Arachnia.
Black Arachnia, I think, rules in the show.
Her
Her stuff with Starscream is awesome.
Yeah, I enjoy Black Arachnia. I enjoy how she's also kind of scheming and she kind of does go against the Predacons because, once again, we talked about this last time. In the original show, she switches sides way deep in the show. I think around like when they go to the transmetals or whatever, she eventually switches sides, but that's neither here nor there. Yeah, I feel like Air Razor was essentially there just to help Dinobots. Or just like to help push Dinobot over the edge a little bit.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of why I like Air Razor. I'm not saying that Air Razor is like Dinobot or even Black Arachnia level like character. I just think her character works for me in the season.
Does.
A lot of it does have to do with her interactions with Dinobot and Black Arachnia. But I think as far as like the Maximals go, Cheetor and Tigertron.
Rat Trap.
Oh yeah, Rat Trap's kind of fun though. But he's just the same Rat Trap. They didn't do anything with him.
Would not know these characters' names without listening to these podcasts.
Yeah, Rat Trap has the same voice.
That's one of my biggest what don't I like about the show? I don't know who these people are unless I've spent hours outside of the show trying to figure it out.
Right.
Yeah. So the guy who stays behind, that's Rhinox. He was my favorite growing up. And I'm really bummed that he was just delegated to, you're going to help out on the ship because you're a smart genius, because he is a smart genius in the show.
But he's also thing where it's like, oh, you got to purge the dead universe stuff. Boop, boop, boop. Did it.
I mean, he's extremely intelligent in Beast Wars, but I was also bummed that he's a kick-ass fighter too. I was like, dang it. Oh well.
Just touching on the Air Razor thing, she has this part. This reminded me of what bothered me with Siege, but it's Air Razor when she's talking to Dinobot, and she says things don't have to be binary. You don't have to pick between the two sides. And I'm like, okay, don't say that if all you're gonna have him do is actually just be a good guy at the end.
Sure.
And then we get the part where it's like, I want to make my own choice, but the only way to do what's right is to be forced to make the other choice. Something like that, where he's like, there is no choice but to be maximal.
Real quickly, if you hear anything in the background audience, that is there's house being played in the other room there. I just wanted a little, just in case.
He hasn't heard it yet.
Oh.
I mean, if anything, if you heard dishes, sorry.
No. Yeah, no, I agree with you though.
Yeah, it bothers me that they play with this concept of like, what if something exists outside of just Autobot good, Decepticon bad,
or Predacon good, Maximals bad.
And but they won't do it.
No, they won't. But I think they did in the comic.
Ben, I really want to know what you thought of Predacon Megatron.
At first I was like, wow, he is just kissing Megatron's ass. And there are times where okay, yeah, the Predacon Megatron's cool. Other times I'm like, dude, stop kissing Megatron's ass.
Megatron's whole thing where he's just like, you need to change your name.
And
I'm not calling you Megatron.
Yeah, he's like, okay. And then it's like, no, the Megatron I know doesn't do that. But I would like how he eventually says, no, I am Megatron. And he like starts wrecking fools and shit. So it's kind of like, there are parts where I like him. There are parts where I'm not a really big fan of him. this isn't a knock on the voice actor, but I wasn't a fan of the voice actor, to be perfectly honest.
The voice acting across this show has been a big problem for me. Some I like, some I really don't, and it is really not any in between.
I think it comes down to the vocal director, and there's a lot. There are a lot of newer voice actors in this show, and then a chunk of seasoned, and the ones that are newer, they are suffering, I think, from bad vocal direction more than like I will say it is on the voice actors. Sure. I don't think I'm willing to say that. I think like knowing the show,
I'm not blaming.
No, yeah. But knowing that the show came in on the cheap, and knowing that the people who, if you like look at the like cast list and everything, and you look at their work before, the people who have come out stronger, I would say like Starscream, Megatron, Dinobot. Those voice actors have a lot more experience than the ones who have come out in general weaker. And I think that is like whoever was vocal direction wasn't doing their job to get the best performance or help guide the best performance out of people.
I know we keep going back to Dinobot and we're trying to move from Dinobot, but I really like Dinobot's voice, to be perfectly honon.
No, I love Dinobot.
Because as I'm watching the show, I'm getting flashbacks from when I watched Beast Wars as a kid, and with Predacon Megatron, with Megatron, if you will, his voice, he's more grandiose, if that makes sense. I
will say this, Ben. I like his voice in this show better than I liked his voice in the original Beast Wars.
Wow.
Okay.
Cool. So Transformers fandom hates Predacon Megatron in this show. Really? It's pretty much the number one thing. One of those podcasts in particular hates it so much that they were like, yeah, when I was watching it with my kids, I muted it and did my impression of Beast Wars Predacon Megatron to make up for it. And I'm like, that's so aggressive. And like the way they described it. So the way they described it is like, they don't like the voice, but they also don't like how the character is subservient to Megatron. Like not a badass in his own right. And I'm like, if you just change the voice, like that's not going to change that's who that character is.
That's a different
but that's their concept of it. So here's my pushback on that as a person who has no shits to give about the original Predacon Megatron. The voice actor for Predacon Megatron, I'm not going to say his vocal performance is always great, but in general, his voice for the character is serving the story that they're telling, which is a subservient Predacon Megatron to Megatron. If you don't like that story element, I get it. I get it. But the voice is appropriate to the way he is being used.
Yeah, I like that.
And I had no problems with Predacon Megatron. I didn't think he was even close to one of the major issues with the season.
It's what I was saying. Like, I like the idea that Predacon Megatron comes from the future thinking that he can save Megatron. So because he's constantly under threat from Galvatron.
I think so too. And my other thing is that you already have classic Megatron and Galvatron in this show. If Predacon Megatron was acting the way that I now understand Predacon Megatron to have acted,
it's just Megatron.
You just have 3 Megatrons, and we don't need 3 Megatrons for this season, all doing the same kind of character. Galvatron and Megatron doing it is fine. Predacon Megatron, because he is in himself his own separate identity inspired by Megatron, should be different, and I think they made a good choice.
I do too. Yeah, I liked Predacon Megatron.
I get that if you're attached to the old version, this pisses you off. It clearly did push a button on a whole lot of Transformers fandom, which is why I was really curious where you were going to land, Ben. But it is honest to God been a make or break for Kingdom for a lot of fans.
Yeah.
Is Predacon Megatron. That's like where they're drawing the line in the sand. And I'm like, I don't get it, guys. I don't get it.
So Sparkz, the way you just described it as, because you're right, Megatron is a more subservient, Megatron is more subservient in this show than he was.
Say the whole word.
Predacon Megatron is more subservient, and you're right, that voice does fit, because he is like, because he sees Lord Megatron, he took his name, he's like, I want to be just, or he's not, I don't want to be just like you, I want to help save you. So I completely understand.
See, that's the thing. I didn't take it as subservience. I took it as desperation to save Megatron's soul.
When I say subservient, it's not that like the character in himself is subservient. He is only subservient to Megatron. He is there just to be of service to
That's
Megatron.
why he's in the past.
Right. No, I get that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, like, I'm not saying like he is a subservient character to everyone.
Right.
He is only subservient to Megatron.
Right. I'm not so much going after your point, but more so the Transformers fandom point of just of this idea that this character, it makes sense to me that this Megatron, that Predacon Megatron, would be like this because his whole purpose in the past is to do this. He didn't come to the past on accident like the original show. He is there with a purpose to save Megatron's soul, and I think that really works.
Yeah. Go ahead, Ben. Finish out your thought.
I think I lost it.
You were talking about like how the voice works for.
Yeah. I mean, really, the reason why I have like an air quotes issue with the voice is because I remember the original one so vividly, and I guess kind of fondly because I really didn't like, even though I only watched Beast Wars to watch Digimon afterwards because it was on before Digimon, I still really got into it because that was my first. Because besides renting some VHS tapes from my local video store of the original Transformers, this was my gateway into Transformers universe was Beast Wars. That was my era. So just listening to this Megatron and the way that the voice actor deliver its voice, I mean, it didn't make or break the entire series for me because even when I was watching the original cartoons, like the 84, the Gen 1 Transformers and Beast Wars, and I see but that guy's Megatron and that guy's Megatron, I'm like, are they the same? Oh, well, they just have the same name, whatever. Yeah. And it wasn't until I got older that I realized, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Is he a dragon in Beast Machines?
Yes, he is.
Right.
So,
I remember that.
Yeah, that more or less covers Predacon Megatron in the way I wanted to. I just know that is like such a major sticking point, and I do think like your mileage depends on like how attached you are to the previous incarnation of the character.
That makes sense.
But my biggest thing is like other characters in this version are being adjusted, reinterpreted, reimagined. Why can't Predacon Megatron be?
I love
I get that you like the voice, but also recognize that like you didn't need that same character in this story because that'd just be double Megatron.
Yeah.
And nobody needed like the same character twice.
Right.
Yeah. I like the stuff with the golden disc.
Yes, I think that the golden disc as a... Go ahead.
I was going to say I enjoy how the golden disc is a recording of Galvatron in the very far future saying like, this is what I need to do to fix everything. I kind of like that.
He's not Galvatron yet. He's still Megatron who's making the recording, because you see when Starscream holds the recording, that's when we hear him turn into Galvatron.
Right.
Then that's like the last thing they recorded. Because they didn't want to... Galvatron didn't want Megatron to know that they were the same person. Yeah, I like... So in the original show, it's the Voyager 1. It's the Voyager. It's a real thing. It's a real thing that we really put in a satellite in Voyager 1 and shot off into space. Yeah, and that's what that is. But in this, they've kind of co-opted the design and made it a recording. I think that's kind of cool.
I do too. I think making it something of Megatron's recording from the future that they're using to steer a lot of the story is smart.
Yeah, but it does come into I like that, but it also leads into the issue that I have, that I don't get what the original timeline was supposed to be.
It doesn't matter.
Well, it does to me in a way, because it's part of what confused me so much. Because towards the... I don't know if we want to get into towards the final episode too much.
Go ahead.
Well, what I'm trying to articulate is that I don't get... Megatron recorded all these things about supposedly trying to find the Allspark, and it was not clear if he did or Optimus did. But what happened was somehow they ended up in the dead universe and never made it back to Cybertron until Nemesis Prime and Galvatron brought them through. Like, I'm unclear. I guess issue is too strong of a word, but I'm unclear of what the timeline that they're supposed to be preventing with the golden disc, with bringing this back to Cybertron, was meant to be. You know what I'm saying?
Sort of.
Yeah.
It's
hard to articulate time travel stuff.
You're not wrong, because I was also confused about the whole timeline thing. Whereas after they launch the arc and they go back through space and then they end up in the dead universe again, it's like, wait, I thought they weren't supposed to go through the dead universe, and then all of a sudden they get brought back to the future Cybertron with Nemesis, Galvatron,
Right.
and everything. I was like, wait, I thought
And we hear them say that they never make it out of the dead universe. That's where the All Sparkz journey ends. But how? But it's, I don't know. It's weird. I'm a little.
It also doesn't make sense why they end up back in the dead universe, because they're supposed to know how to not do it.
They even say like Teletran 1, what the hell, essentially, and then they like disappear out of it. It's a little weird, right?
Yeah. Although to
It's
see
getting
Teletran 1, to see Teletran 1 transform into the arc to punch the Nemesis, the Nemesis, that was pretty rad.
That was pretty cool.
Hey man, the show is nothing if it doesn't love a good Deus Ex Machina.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A good big old
Lord.
transformer.
Oh man.
I don't know. Is this Teletran 1 a transformer in the original show? I don't remember that.
No, it's just a computer that is able to modify the original Transformers and turn them into machines that adapt to their environment. It's like in it's like in freaking the very first Michael Bay film, when all the original Transformers fly down and they see, it's like, oh, I can transform into that, and then they transform into that.
Right. It's only been recently that they could transform on Cybertron in canon. Which I honestly I prefer. I like the idea that they were Transformers on Cybertron, not just robots that found transforming power.
Yeah.
Okay, wait a second. Sorry, I talked about this with Earthrise. Earthrise, we don't get a clear ending to the Quintesson plotline. That bugged me. We still don't have that. What the hell?
Yeah.
What the hell, guys?
I will comment on that later when we are doing like trilogy discussion.
Okay.
I think for Kingdom, I just want to run through some stuff here. I think everything with Megatron's pretty solid.
Yeah, I think so too.
I really love him with the Matrix strapped onto his chest.
It's rejecting him.
That he's just forced it on there with like ammo belts and shit. Like it looks good. I think Megatron's vision of grabbing the Allspark and it turns into Ultra Magnus's head is sick as hell.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. That's cool.
That's the content I was here for. So I was really happy about it. Just all of Megatron kind of being unwound. I think a lot of the Autobot and Maximal dialogue in particular is like super clunky. And I don't think it's a voice acting thing. I think it's just written bad.
Yeah, there's I can't remember exactly, but there were definitely some lines. It's like, wow, that was not a well-written line.
Yeah. I want to go back to that Air Razor dialogue bit with, Dinobot. Because I think it's probably one of the best lines written in the show, which is when she's saying, if you look around and can't see what's changed is you.
Yeah, that's pretty
good. I was like, that's a really, really good, convincing.
It's so frustrating, right? It's so
Change
frustrating. You're kind of watching the show, and it's pretty okay sometimes, but then it's like, bam, here's what we could do. And I'm like, oh shit.
Like the second she says, if you can't see what's changed, then what's changed is you. Is like, god damn, that's really good.
And there's like it's sprinkled throughout, but I'm kind of like, if you just did that everywhere, it's a pretty good show.
Yeah,
well, you can tell there's some talent. Not to say that the people who write it aren't talented. Obviously they are, but it's mixed in with some really good lines like that, and then you get some really bad lines that I apparently just completely forgot about. Or not even bad lines, because you remember bad dialogue. It's just mediocre dialogue, and mediocre is probably even worse than, because I can't remember it. We remember the really good stuff, and we can also remember the really shit stuff, but even the stuff in the middle, it's kind of, It's like, man, because there was a lot of that in this show, and that kind of bugs me.
I wish that it was more of a plot line that Optimus didn't have the Matrix.
Yeah.
Like, I like the stuff with Megatron with the Matrix, but it doesn't even phase Optimus.
I mean,
It becomes a MacGuffin for him.
no, I get you. I mean, I agree. Optimus sucks. In this show, his character is garbage. His plot arc is trash.
The only time
I'm not as strong. I want to be clear. I'm not as strong on my feelings as that one, but I don't disagree.
the only time throughout this entire trilogy where I thought, okay, there's some growth here for Optimus. I was looking forward to Kingdom, was Optimus realizing I messed up in Earthrise, where he straight up said I goofed. But then as I'm watching Kingdom, I'm like, Prime isn't. Wow, he's just not that good. It kind of bums me out because Optimus is like. Because every other piece of media that I can think of, the Bayformers, the original cartoon,
don't bring the Bayformers. Hold on, the Bayformers Optimus Prime even 3. The Bayformers Optimus Prime is pretty shitty too. Michael Bay does not understand Optimus Prime. I like Optimus Prime in those movies. He's closer than in the show, but there's still a problem in the fact that he's freaking ruthless in those movies. He blows a dude's head off.
He's an American war hero.
True.
In those movies. That's what he is.
And that's not the same Optimus as we've seen in G1, Armada, Cybertron, Prime. That's not the same Optimus.
Yeah,
but
you're okay. Skip. Pretend I didn't say the Bayformer films. Prime.
I think it's closer. I think it's closer than in this show.
Yeah.
In this show, there's a lot of hey, you remember how Optimus is supposed to be? Just imagine we wrote that.
Yeah.
And I think that's a problem just in general.
It's like, I have the matrix of leadership. It's going to guide me to do stuff. But one of the best parts of Earthrise when he's begging Megatron for forgiveness. He's like, and he has a blaster to his head. He's like, say you forgive me.
Yeah,
and I was like, that was awesome. It's like, oh shit, this is great. And then it's like, I don't have the matrix anymore. Oh, I do have the matrix now. Oh, I'm just sad.
It's not even that he doesn't have the matrix. It's that it doesn't bother him. It doesn't bug him. Optimus Primal says, if you're really Optimus Prime, show me the matrix of leadership, and then we're off to the races.
It's like,
don't worry about it.
He's like, oh, Megatron took it. And then throughout the entire rest of Kingdom, he's like, I'm Sadimus Prime now.
Sadimus Prime. Holy shit.
Jesus.
I'm not wrong.
No, I have more thoughts on Optimus, but I'll say them later. Funny bit with the Autobots having trouble keeping up with the Maximals.
Yeah.
The way they can traverse terrain joke.
I like
very funny. Also, a very cheeky way to acknowledge we couldn't afford to show transformations here. Their budget was so tight then that they literally cut a character from Earthrise just so a Maximal could have a transformation in Kingdom.
Wow.
That's how tight the budget was. That's why there's not a lot of transformations.
I do like the idea of I'll talk about that in a minute. I do like the idea that the Maximals and the Predacons are more accustomed or more prepared to traverse the terrain of this Earth.
Yeah.
Whereas the cars aren't.
Right.
And I think that's a cool concept. And I'm glad that they actually acknowledge that.
Having said that was funny. Notably, and this is pretty much a trilogy note, but it stood out to me in Kingdom. Very little of the humor lands for me.
Yeah. Sometimes funny.
Yeah.
I don't think anytime they try to be funny, it almost never works for me.
Yeah.
And it never works for me in a way where I'm like, I don't know who this works for.
Yeah.
The writers, I assume.
I honestly
I
didn't think it was. I was about to say the same thing. I was like,
what I just told you was a joke.
Well, that was kind of funny.
Right, and it was.
Yeah.
And I pointed it out because I'm like, I think that's one of the only things I thought was actually funny in this show. Rat Trap cracks jokes. Red Alert at one point has
Red Alert's in the show?
Yes. And I only know that because he has a line where he says, I'm always alert.
Jesus.
Anyway. So on the note of Optimus, it's really good that the show in Kingdom keeps reflecting on the stupidity of Optimus throwing the Allspark off of Cybertron. It is kind of being carried around in the consciousness of some of the characters, but it also constantly is reinforcing the lackluster justifications of that choice from everyone around Optimus being like, nah, man, that was all you could do. And I'm like, no, I watched Siege. He could have done other stuff.
When Megatron says you're going to destroy Cybertron, he's just like, nah,
No, we'll definitely get into that.
Oh,
He
can
just
I
straight up
actually?
eats it.
Did you have a note in there about Alita one
Yeah, which one?
about her in this season?
Oh, you mean that she's fridged?
I was furious. Furious, I tell you.
Okay, so I have another question for you. When do you think Alita 1 died?
I don't even know.
Okay, can I tell you the answer?
Sure.
Okay, it was the end of Earthrise. Did you miss it? When they fell? That was them dying.
What? 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 Wait. What? Wait. What happened at the end of Earthrise?
So when we see them on Cybertron, there's the explosion.
The explosion at the Coliseum.
Yeah, and Jetfire and Alita fall in it.
Yeah. Okay.
That was them dying.
Son of a.
What?
I didn't know that either until the showrunner said it on an interview.
If you have to say it, clearly something doesn't translate
Right.
very well. I was so upset because here's the thing. I
was too.
I think Alita's a cool character. I like her in Siege. I like her in Earthrise until Megatron pieces out off the planet. In which case, I kind of find the whole Cybertron thing boring, but not because of her. I still like her as a character.
Yeah.
And I was excited for the idea, like,
where those paths re-meet.
Reconnect.
Yeah.
I thought that would be a really cool emotional moment where Alita could be like, you know what, like either she's mad at Optimus for this or she's happy to see Optimus.
So I was partway through Kingdom when I listened to the interview that was talking about Earthrise, where he revealed that was them dying, and I'm like, what? Are you kidding me? I'm gonna get to the end of the show and they're not gonna see Alita again.
You have one of the most compelling characters in this entire show, like the best one one of the best ones in my opinion.
I would not say she's the best one, but she is one of them. Yeah.
Yeah, she's one of the best ones, and it's like, oh, we're just gonna kill her off unceremoniously because you see Jetfire flying down again. I'm like, oh, cool, she's fine. No worries.
The thing that bugs me so much about that is that we see Alita as the Allspark, and I thought that was going somewhere.
Yeah,
but it doesn't.
Nope.
And I hate it.
Yeah.
Do we remember if the relationship between Optimus and Alita was obvious in Siege?
It's meant to be romantic in Siege.
It's implied.
Okay.
It's implied. It's also implied in Earthrise that at one point in time it might have been Megatron instead of Optimus, but she picked Optimus.
And it feels like it's not necessarily Optimus, but Orion.
Right, Orion.
Orion Pax. It's not necessarily that she loved Optimus.
Yeah.
So attached to that, yes, I hate that Alita's dead. I hate that they fridged her. I hate that she's just Optimus's representational motivation of who he failed on Cybertron. They talk about why they killed Alita in interviews for Kingdom. They talk about she's meant to be the cost, like the cost of Optimus's choice. She's just you needed a character to represent the cost of what he did.
Character. Jetfire. I don't care about Jetfire.
That planet was full of people. They're dead. I don't know why you had to have Alita
the
be
whole
specifically the
planet is dead when he comes back.
Okay,
and it could be that. Like the thing is,
okay, hold on. So wait.
I'm gonna write this down so I don't. Forget
so what bothers me about the Alita thing is that it's immediately preceded by Bumblebee talking with Optimus, and Bumblebee saying, "Nobody cares that it was your fault. Don't be sorry. You know, you did what you had to do. We're just gonna fix it." And then he's immediately after he says that looking over at Alita's arm and she's dead. And I'm like, you can't just be like, nah, man, it's okay. We'll fix it. Nobody cares that this was your fault.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure someone does, and she's
the worst part
way over there.
And real quick, I just want to back up on that thought and mention that the worst part about that to me is this was a Bumblebee who was introduced as not wanting to pick a side.
Yeah,
that's how this show started.
But he's the chosen one.
That's how this show started, and Bumblebee's now just like
the chosen one,
totally drinking the Optimus Kool-Aid, like 100%. Optimus cannot be criticized.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Okay, so I want to touch on the thing that another thing that bugs me about the Alita death, about the whole Cybertron death thing. I think it is fine that Cybertron is a dead planet, but I think it's important that on that dead planet there are still Cybertronians alive, struggling but alive, because Optimus, we know from the Maximals and the Predacons, they said Optimus and Megatron don't return to Cybertron with the Allspark.
Yep.
We have developed off on Cybertron without the Allspark. And so the question becomes, where the hell did they come from? You don't just spontaneously create something. I thought that they evolved from the survivors on Cybertron. Like Alita.
Okay, so like my understanding is that they're eventually like from another colony. Like not in this show. Not in this show.
Right.
Beast Wars originally.
Yes.
I
thought they were from Cybertron.
Supposedly they come from another colony that had been off of Cybertron.
Okay.
That's where their evolution occurred. As you know, they'd left Cybertron. Like their ancestors had left Cybertron.
Sure.
To a new colony before the war had gotten the worst that it got. That's my understanding from like what I listened to on the podcast. That's old Beast Wars.
But that's
lore.
clearly not meant to be this lore.
Right, and I'm not knocking that, but I do think it plays in the vague space of there. We're like, well, we don't really have to answer that question because that's kind of the answer. Like, I'm not saying that's excuses that there's no answer.
No, but like it's frustrating because like they make it so that like Optimus Primal and Megatron, Predacon Megatron are talking about like we grew up on a Cybertron, we developed on a Cybertron, we evolved on a Cybertron that didn't have the Allspark because you never came back.
Yeah.
And like how?
So I think the implication is meant to be that they come from that colony back to Cybertron while it's unpopulated and try and make something of it again.
Look, I'll accept it.
No, I know, I get it.
I'm not happy about it.
It's poorly thought out, to say the least. Hey, by the way, talking about the Alita one thing, it's total bullshit that Alita says it was the only choice when she's a ghost, and Optimus is like, I'm sorry. And she's like, nah, it was the only choice, bro.
You just died.
Referring to throwing the Allspark off the planet when Optimus is once again asking for forgiveness, because he's always asking for forgiveness, and everybody's just giving it to him.
They always try to make it that it was the only choice. And I kind of understand from a writing standpoint, you really want to try and make your Optimus Prime.
But you can't make that happen when I watched it and it wasn't.
Right. But like after Siege, when we do Earthrise and Kingdom, it's just everyone's just like, well, if I didn't, then Megatron would have gotten the Allspark, and we've all been Decepticons now.
But
we don't know that.
But here's the thing: I think the things that really work against this whole concept, and so like the tangent we're about to go down, this is the core biggest problem with this whole trilogy for me, which is that everything is happening because of trying to get the Allspark away from Megatron.
Yeah.
And the way Optimus chooses to do it, and we talked about this when we talked about it on Fake Nerd Podcast, and it was the biggest problem I had, and it still is that everybody around Optimus and even in Siege, most of the Autobots are saying, I don't know if the right idea is to take it off of Cybertron. And Optimus saying, no, it is. And even Optimus is like, it probably will kill the planet. But what else can we do? That's their approach. So everything that happens after that is on Optimus.
Yeah.
It's not on Megatron. Like, yes, what Megatron was going to do, also bad. Not as bad as mass genocide. And when Megatron feels backed into a corner by Optimus because Optimus is saying, I'm going to pull an extinction level event on Cybertron, killing what we know because of this show is not just Autobots and Decepticons, but Cybertronians who decided not to get involved in the war, which they explicitly tell us is what's up.
Mm-hmm. All dead.
Optimus is not a good person, and yet we have to follow him through Earthrise and Kingdom like he's some hero character on a great quest, when literally all he's done is go, F this planet. Oops. Hold on, let me go get it. And by the time he gets back, everybody died. Yeah. Everybody died. And
Didn't need-
regardless of the fact that Megatron took the Energon from a bunch of those people, which, by the way, their intention is that years pass between Siege and Earthrise. Years passed on Cybertron with Megatron trying to make things work and running out of Energon. So I wish that was more clearly stated in the show, but that was the intent of the writers. And knowing that Megatron's like unwillingness to shut down a sector and turn them over to that Energon project where he's sucking the Energon out of them just to barely keep things alive feels more desperate and earned. Optimus is responsible for that too. Yeah, Megatron's 100%. Doing it, but Optimus is the person who put him in the position to have to. Yeah. So all of this death is on Optimus. Optimus is the bad guy, guys. And that is and the fact that the show constantly tries to like gaslight me into thinking that it wasn't that way.
But Sparkz. It's Optimus.
Yeah.
Sparkz. It's Optimus.
That's the thing. The show is constantly trying to tell me, no, he was right. That was justified. All the Autobots who were questioning it before are like, nah, man, like that was the only choice. Yeah, definitely. Good job, Optimus.
They're all brainwashed
we'll go out and we'll get the Allspark and it'll be fine.
It's like, oh, what, you're working at me now? Cool, the Kool-Aid? Cool, thanks, Sip.
The show digs itself such a deep hole in Siege that makes it absolutely impossible to justify Optimus's choice to throw the Allspark off the planet. And then constantly tries to tell us that it was the only way afterwards, while we are watching everybody die because of it. Yeah. And I just cannot believe that's what happens in this show. I cannot believe that it tries to tell me Optimus is the good guy.
Allow me one last button on the Elita One thing.
Yeah.
When you have a character decide to stay behind, you converge your main character
because she didn't agree with his choice.
Yes.
To begin with,
you split your main characters. You got to put Luke and Han back together again. They got to come back. Because if they don't, you cheat the audience.
Yeah.
I feel cheated.
Yeah.
That we don't get a reunion. And I don't want to see it. I don't want to see a comment that says we see Allspark Ghost Elita 1. I don't want to see one comment about that. It's not the same thing.
Well, I think the worst part about it is that she shows up and she had to live through the consequences of everything.
Apparently years.
She had to live through the consequences of everything Optimus caused, which she, again, the reason she stays behind is because she's like, there are people who need help here. I'm going to stay because, you threw the Allspark off the planet and everyone is going to die. And for him to come back and her to be like, nah, bro, good job. And like, I could kind of find a way to be accepting of it if you had made me feel like Megatron was so dangerous with the Allspark in his hand that it absolutely needed to be thrown off the planet, but Siege doesn't convince me of that.
I feel like you could have convinced him.
And if you could convince me that the idea of them having been at peace with the fact that their sparks are reuniting with the Allspark, and that's kind of a sense of gratification in itself. I think there is somewhere with those two elements you could have made this workable into a kind of like acceptance of like, oh, man, like, we all make mistakes, but you ultimately like you pulled through and you did
the right thing in the end.
You did something right for us. That's just not the message the show is sending.
The message is, see what you did there? That was the right thing to do.
Yeah. And that's absolutely 100% the biggest hurdle I have with this whole trilogy. And obviously this comes to its head in Kingdom. And I sat there and I'm just like, this is the worst like central plot ever. It's just so bad. I'm truly baffled by like how anyone can watch it and just find Optimus infallible.
Because it's Optimus.
It just
they're projecting.
Any other story where a hero did this, Superman, anything, we would be talking about the fact like, what the hell happened? He just killed all those people.
Killed an entire planet worth of people. He
He
committed genocide.
he's no different than he didn't like physically go and kill all of them, but he is the person who essentially like denied them the resources to live. He's like a bad landlord.
Who was the other statue?
Oh, so the statues are just an Autobot and a Decepticon. They are no one in particular.
But I thought it was.
Nope,
Ultra
I looked
Magnus.
it up.
Looks
It is
like Ultra
no
Magnus.
That may be true. It is no one in particular. It is just meant to be a generic Autobot and a generic Decepticon, showing that they stood back to back at one point, did the thing they had to do. Yeah, I looked it up because I was like, who were those? And I looked it up, and it's like, it's an Autobot and a Decepticon.
And the thing is, you don't even see like
Get
the
out.
emblems on the chest or anything. It's like I didn't know. I just saw.
No, it's a bad
Like,
representation.
there's a lot of stuff, Sparkz, that you bring up about that show. That's like, man, this is like bad representation. This is bad, just bad writing, and just a whole bunch of.
So here's the thing. Flip over to Megatron. Brilliant. I love Megatron's whole story from Siege to here. I think is amazing. Incredible. What an arc. The fact that it all comes down like you've watched him start from the person who said in Siege, he says, we will not kill these Autobots that Starscream wants to kill when they're put in front of him. That's not how you change sparks and minds. That's where Megatron starts in this show.
Yeah.
And he slowly gets radicalized. Faster than I wish he had, but slowly gets radicalized by Shockwave and Starscream at his side. And the circumstances he's put in. And he starts unwinding and he feels desperate, and years go by and he's watched his people have to suffer on Cybertron because of what Optimus did, which he's right. It's because of what Optimus did. And he gets obsessed over it and he steals the Matrix and he goes crazy and he feels bad because he killed his friend. And then at the end, he's faced with, bro, if you go down this path, you're going to be the one thing you never want to be again, which is a slave.
Yeah.
Make the choice and stand with the Autobots. And him put on that point where he's next to Galvatron and Starscream's like, bro, like, what are you going to do? And Megatron being like, I'm going to be the author of Galvatron's fate.
Yeah.
Holy shit, Megatron has the best story. His story is incredible.
I also want to say that I do think the ultimately I like the ending of the Decepticons and the Autobots Maximals and Predacons all coming together to stop Galvatron and Nemesis Prime.
Yeah.
In sense, stopping Unicron, or well, not necessarily stopping Unicron, just stopping Galvatron and Megatron from stopping Unicron.
Stopping Unicron's current plan. Well,
But it was Galvatron.
but it wasn't his plan. But like stopping the thing that Unicron orchestrate. In a sense, they are stopping Unicron's plan because Unicron's plan is for the Autobots and Decepticons to keep fighting each other.
Right.
And they stopped doing that to fight Galvatron and Nemesis Prime, who had their own plan to stop Unicron.
Right. But I like the idea of Starscream kind of hearing Unicron's voice.
Oh my god, I love Starscream. The last 2 episodes with Starscream,
Love it.
Incredible.
When he falls off the ship and he's like, I can fly. And then
no, he's being held by
Yeah.
Megatron, and he's like, there's nothing useful about you, Starscream, and he's like, I can fly.
it's just like, I love it. I love it.
Okay, so Starscream reading the golden disc, and then he comes to the Autobots and the Maximals, and he's like, you need to know what's happening, what's really going on. He thinks I'm too weak, and he's right.
Yes.
This is a Starscream that's never existed
No.
before. This is
Love
a
it.
Starscream who's like, he has seen his own shadow of failure.
Yeah.
And being the whipping boy of Megatron and all this. And he's decided, I need to get out of this cycle. And I think that's incredible. Like, to be honest with you, like, more than anything, I want to follow up to this specifically to follow Starscream.
Yeah. Especially at the end when he's like, I still hear him.
Yes. Oh my god, incredible.
Oh.
Like my favorite animation sequence in the show is when he hears Unicron's voice and turns, and then there's Unicron and him.
Yeah.
And it's just the madness as he's blown back and he turns to Galvatron, and I'm like, oh my god. That was incredible.
What were you gonna say, Ben?
Everything up to the very end, it's just like for me, I was like, Starscream bullshit 101. He's gonna try and to betray Megatron. He's gonna like you see him when you're in like the Allspark Forest and he's holding the crown. That he's like, I am the
I love
Lord.
that.
Yeah,
This was the only illusion I liked.
Yeah. And you see that, and I was like, oh, yep, that's what's going to happen. Then Galvatron's going to turn him into dust, and we know what's going to happen here. But the second he gets the disc and listens and then goes to the Autobots, and you see a frantic, I don't want to say crazy Starscream, but a frantic Starscream.
It's kind of like it's kind of like those people like the world's going to end. Like, why aren't you listening to me? The world's going to end. This thing is going to kill us.
But the second that switch.
Who's the character in Crisis on Infinite Earths? He's the guy who's coming, and he's like he knows what's coming, and he's going. You know who I'm talking about?
Yes,
he's that.
Yeah, I don't know the name.
I love him as this herald of destruction. This person who just Starscream. I like Starscream throughout the show. I think his vocal performance is incredible, and I also think that his arc has been fairly solid.
Yeah.
I really love when he teams up with Black Arachnia, him going around with Dinobot. I think all of that is really nice. I think it works really well. It makes me interested in following him, and then this happened, and I'm like, oh my god, Starscream's amazing.
And the thing is, I didn't expect it at all.
No,
I didn't expect that direction at all.
Like this whole time from Siege to now, to Siege up to that point before Starscream gets the disc, it's all his bravado. He's like when he's talking to Black Arachnia, he's like, surely you've heard the legends of Air Commander Starscream. It's like, you're a wimp, dude. You suck. Every plan you've hatched has failed spectacularly. The only time you were ever a badass was in a video game. And this time...
I don't think anybody said that in the show, though.
No, but...
Not in those words.
Yeah. But then when he gets the disc and he realizes what's going on and he knows and he goes to the Autobots and he admits that he is weak, it's like, oh, for me, because I've always liked Starscream's design, him as a character I hated, but I was like, I'm listening.
Yeah, it's all like when he's talking to Bumblebee and Bumblebee breaks the disc and he's just like, no, you don't understand. This is what he wants.
Oh my god, yeah. When he says to Bumblebee, what if the whole war, us, Autobots, Decepticons, the whole thing, what if someone wants us to do that?
Yeah.
What if someone made us do it? And I'm like, holy shit.
Like all of a sudden, I was interested in Starscream. I like Starscream, but all of a sudden I was like, what just happened?
The moment the Unicron part happens where he's like facing Unicron, I did one of the things I rarely do, which is where I went,
yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
I leaned in and I'm like, excuse me?
What's happening now? I like that because, it parallels Starscream was a force to turn Megatron further into his madness.
Yes,
and now
he was radicalizing him, and now he was trying to pull him back.
Very
much like Dinobot trying to save he was trying to save Megatron.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I really like Starscream being like, if you do this, if you go down this path, you will become what you have feared.
You will be a slave.
Love it. Love it.
This is what I said earlier about how the show has its shining moment.
Is this my favorite season? Is this my favorite season?
Well, this is
like
what
stuff.
Well, this is what I was saying earlier about how was with this entire trilogy, how it has its golden nuggets, but it also has its absolute crap.
Yep.
Like all the stuff we were talking about with Alita 1, like the way she died, which I did not think she was dead, and it pissed me off that she died. And then we get to like the stuff with Starscream, and then you get the stuff with Megatron. I feel like when people wrote this, it's like, hey, let's make the Decepticons compelling. Let's actually give them some good shit. Whereas the Autobots, it's like, yeah, they're the Autobots. Who cares?
I don't necessarily think that was the case. I just think that they were allowed to spend more time on the Decepticons and weren't allowed as much time on the Autobots.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Ben.
Yeah.
I remember Galvatron, obviously.
Yeah.
And I know Nemesis Prime. I've never seen the episode where Nemesis Prime shows up. I don't recall Nemesis Prime being an agent of Unicron in the original show, though.
I haven't gotten to that episode myself. The only thing I knew about Nemesis Prime was I saw his action figure at Swap Me once, and I thought that Nemesis Prime was like kind of like a what if. Is like, what if Optimus Prime turned evil? Or is like,
I'm pretty sure it's after he died. It's after he died in the movie.
Because I had this guidebook where Optimus comes back, but he's not Nemesis Prime. He's kind of like a zombie in a way.
He's a zombie when he first comes back.
And then the Matrix brings him back, and then Rodimus gives him the Matrix again, and he's Optimus Prime.
Yeah, I remember that.
What my understanding is that this is the first time that it's been explicitly said that Unicron made Nemesis Prime.
Oh, okay.
There's a lot of different. Nemesis Prime probably has the most inconsistent and different originations between different Transformers medias.
Sure.
From what I gathered, this was also beyond just podcasts. I did a little bit of research on this one. It's implied in at least one of those, and I could not tell you which one, that Nemesis Prime is Galvatron version of Optimus, essentially, from Unicron.
Galvatron got the better of the deal.
But supposedly this is the only show that's said Unicron made Nemesis Prime.
Why didn't he give him a new design like Galvatron? Seems a little lazy.
Yeah.
I'm only kidding. I don't actually want an answer to that.
I mean, because when I first saw the action figure,
because you can't improve perfection.
Oh, you're right.
I mean, if he wasn't gonna say it, I was. Because
Galvatron's design is pretty cool.
No, that's me being sarcastic about how Optimus is infallible.
Oh yeah.
What I was going to say was, I thought when I saw the Nemesis Prime out of like that swap meet, I thought I was like, oh, maybe it's just like they're like, hey, we're just gonna reskin the Autobots and Decepticons because we like this color scheme, or maybe the Decepticons decided to create their own clone version of Prime and they named Nemesis Prime. I don't freaking know, and I didn't care. I just thought, oh, Optimus has Decepticon. That's cool. Didn't buy it.
Remember how there were clones introduced in Siege and we never talked about them again?
There were.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Soundwave was a bad. He was a bad, messed up clone of Shockwave.
Yeah, I remember that.
Anyway, Starscream says you were born a slave and you will die a slave, and I think that's really dope. Megatron also has one of my favorite moments from Megatron, which is "I am a weapon," and he turns into the tank.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Oh man, just like you're useless. I can fly. It's just
it's like,
so good.
Megatron, you need a weapon. I am a weapon.
That's right. He's got a giant cannon on his head, on his arm.
I didn't get to comment on it, but like it obviously applies here in Kingdom. I think Galvatron's really good. I think the voice actor is really good. He brings a similar energy to Megatron, but they're different voice actors, and I think they're both bringing something strong to the table.
I agree. I like Galvatron a lot.
I really love that Black Arachnia is liking the ladies.
Me too.
Because these are robots and sexuality doesn't matter, so that's pretty cool.
And I like her little flirtatious design with Airazor.
Like when she sees RC. Peak one's cute. I'm like,
yeah. I was like, oh,
and you know, and has that moment with Razorhawk.
Is it Razorhawk?
Airazor. Thank you.
She gives Airazor a little kiss. I'm like, oh, okay then.
Well, even like careful. I like it rough.
So
and Airazor's like, what?
So there's this moment where Optimus lets Megatron go get the Allspark, and Megatron's really crazy, and he's saying he's going to use the Allspark to remake Cybertron in his image. And Optimus acknowledges that Megatron's intentional plan had been to save it, because he's like, I thought you were going to save Cybertron, and I'm like, wait a minute, Optimus. Do you believe that he intended to do that? Because I feel like if you believe that that was ever Megatron's intention, there was maybe a better option than throw the Allspark off the planet to get away from Megatron.
It's just weird that the Allspark came into either of their plans at all.
Yeah,
because they were just at war, and then they were like, the lifeblood of our planet can be used.
So we did touch on it a little bit earlier, but the concept of Sparkz giving themselves for the Allspark. And to help it live, and tying that to Optimus Primal seeing Maximals and Predacons together and saying till all are one. I thought that was a really beautiful moment. I wish there was a little bit more of that extrapolated into the show. Yeah. Again, like kind of pushing against the binary concept of them having to fight against each other.
It's definitely implied that like the till all
at the end of the day, we're all on the same side.
Yeah. It's a beautiful moment, but I also kind of like the idea that it's meant to be like, like at the end how we unify against Galvatron and Nemesis.
In a similar vein, I love when Megatron says, "If I could have known then what I know now, if only we had worked together."
Together, yes. Oh my God, that line I really like, and that's came from recording.
And so the thing is, I'm really glad that it comes from Megatron and not Optimus.
Yeah.
In general, because like I'm glad that Megatron is the person who has that kind of.
And it's
because the thing is
Megatron.
like. Because the thing is, like, I believe that more from Megatron
Yeah.
than I would from this version of Optimus.
Yeah.
Because I don't think this version of Optimus ever tried, and I think that's my biggest problem with the stuff in Siege, is it's not like Optimus ever tried to reason with Megatron.
Yeah, I was just a little confused about how, like, if Megatron knew that his future self said, "If only we had worked together," why didn't Megatron reach out to Optimus?
Well, no, because he didn't. Because Megatron was very specific earlier in Kingdom, where he
Oh,
says he only listened to what I needed to know.
Yeah,
he didn't want to know the part. That's why he doesn't know he's Galvatron.
right.
That's why Starscream's the one who tells him, because he listens to the end.
Right.
And he's like, "You fool, you are Galvatron."
But then, like, Galvatron is also the one who puts Megatron, like, goes, "Hey, Megatron, kill Optimus.
Yeah.
Get the Matrix of Leadership."
Yeah.
It's a little weird that Galvatron doesn't be like, "You were supposed to work together."
Because Galvatron's only trying to save himself. He's
Yeah.
not trying to
That's a good
change
point.
the fate
Yeah.
of that timeline.
Yeah.
Because Galvatron
That's a good
knows
point.
that the Matrix is the
All
one thing
all
that
he wants is
scares-
him to do the things that gets hit the Allspark to
Yeah,
him.
and,
Right.
and also he knows that the Matrix leadership is the one thing that Unicron is afraid of, because that's the one thing that could kill him. So he's like, "Hey, you get the Matrix, you don't have to worry about that."
So there's a super big missed opportunity with Nemesis Prime, where Nemesis Prime could have been used to explore how Optimus's consistent failures in this show would eventually lead him to a path where he became Nemesis Prime. So he'd have to, I don't know, reckon with them a little bit.
Like,
But they
we see
didn't-
with Megatron. And
But they didn't
Galvatron.
do that at all, which I think is a huge whiff. I feel like that would have done a lot of goodwill to make me feel okay about the fact that Optimus kind of sucked all the way through the show. As
Yeah.
if he looks at Nemesis Prime and they have this thing where they, exchange words, and it's like, yeah, because you kind of do this stupid thing, okay, and this stupid thing. Mm-hmm. And this stupid thing. Oh, I'm seeing a pattern. And you become Nemesis Prime.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Um,
Because we see it with Galvatron and Megatron.
Right, and I think there's just he was right there. Like
it's
you could have
okay.
you could have just done it.
It's okay. Skylinks kind of said it was okay.
We talked about that Megatron being given the moment of choice. Kind of sucks that Optimus never has to deal with the fact that all the Cybertronians died because of him. All the non-Autobot, non-Decepticon ones, they just water under the bridge.
That's
I guess.
not even a concept after season
No, it's
1.
not. It's not.
That's
It's a little
frustrating.
bit present in season 2.
Sure.
But it's definitely not present in Kingdom. Megatron has the moral ground of his own conception of what moral ground is to not use the Allspark on Unicron, as it would drain the life from Cybertron. And I think that shows his restraint to doom Cybertron the way that Optimus did. So like, because they're like, we could finish off Unicron here now, but that would kill Cybertron.
Right.
And Megatron, more than I feel like Optimus, because of Optimus's choices so far, Megatron's like, I would never do that. I would never do that to Cybertron. And I'm like, that's why Megatron's a better Cybertron leader.
Well, the interesting thing about that is, like, basically they basically at the end they decided, like, we're not going to use the Allspark to destroy Unicron, to fight Unicron. If Unicron shows up, we'll deal with it together.
Yeah.
I kind of think that's a cool message.
I do too. Okay. That's all my notes on Kingdom specifically. So I do.
Well, they tease the end. They tease a sequel.
They do. Unicron grabbing
Nemesis and
Galvatron. Okay, so Hasbro's official stance on their timeline, as
Yes,
described
I'm waiting
by
for you
FJ DeSanto,
to talk
the
about
showrunner, is that they want an aligned continuity.
Yeah.
What that means is that there are key moments of Transformers lore that must always happen and can never be changed. So there is a certain point in time when Alpha Trion must die. There is a certain point in time when Optimus must die and Unicron must make Galvatron, and these things are immovable even as they create different versions and interpretations of things. Two things. What sucks about this is that it very much hamstrings how much they can actually make something new.
Right.
Because they are beholden to. So Ben, the particular example I told Brandon about this that comes up in the interview is the showrunner says that in the original conception of the show in Siege, Ultra Magnus's role was actually Alpha Trion.
Oh.
And then they were told, no, you can't do that because at this point in time, Alpha Trion needs to be dead.
Right.
So that's just like one example, and one example they were able to say. That's how much they are so caught under what Hasbro wants or decides is important.
Unicron is Earth in the last
that they
night.
can't tell tell certain stories. One other thing, Hasbro has also decided that Unicron is a multiversal singularity, which means that Unicron is the same Unicron always.
I need a minute.
No,
I need a minute.
it's bullshit.
I don't necessarily hate that idea because Darkseid in DC Comics is being reinterpreted as that.
That's why I wanted to say it, because you wanted to talk about the tease at the end. Unicron, in Hasbro's eyes, is now a multiversal singularity.
I get the idea that he's omnipresent. That's why he knows what's happening to Galvatron in the time stream.
Right.
I understand that.
Right.
The multiversal thing is where I'm struggling.
So I think the implication going forward that they want to push for is every new interpretation of Transformers, whatever, is always Unicron changing things, screwing around.
So there's no sequel series essentially.
Well, there's nothing been confirmed. There's been nothing confirmed. There could be.
Yeah.
I have no idea. That's really up to Hasbro. Neither does the showrunner or the writers. They have no indication as of the release of Kingdom.
Yeah.
No indication that they're going to continue anything. Tim Sheridan said that they wrote 15 different endings for Kingdom.
Damn.
And he did not know until Kingdom release which one they were going to pick.
Really?
And all of them set up different ideas of things he would love to explore in a Transformers series.
Okay.
So there's definitely ideas on the table that would specifically be piggybacking off what War for Cybertron leaves open.
The thing that bugs me the most, I think, is the aligned continuity thing. I guess I understand the impetus of it. You got a popular toy line. Transformers has been a popular toy line for ages, and you want your multimedia empire to all make sense and be reader and be new audience friendly every single time, and old audience friendly every single time, or whatever. But using Unicron in that sense, this must have happened after the last night, because Unicron is Earth in that movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure this does sound like this is more of a last 5 years decision than it is anything else.
I guess I have to wait and see how, if that idea ever comes to, are we going to see like a multiversal like war with Unicron?
I have no idea. Yeah. Because they're pushing for a multiversal concept. That's obvious in the show, that they at least want to dabble in the fact that like Transformers operates as a multiverse, which means that you can get many different interpretations of the same events.
Sure.
What I think sucks is that so many of those same events have to be the same.
I wonder if it's the same continuity now, in their aligned continuity. I wonder if Cybertron is still Primus. In some canon, I think it's the original, but I'm not 100% sure. Primus is Cybertron. Yeah. The planet of Cybertron is a Transformer.
Right.
And it is the brother to Unicron.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's still the case in this, because Primus is seen as like a god to the Transformers, and Unicron like their devil. That's not really, I don't really have a point with that one. I'm just musing.
Yeah. I definitely am like, I am more interested in where the show could go from here, because there are far more characters on the table right now that I'm curious about what would come next.
Yeah.
But I have a hard time imagining what any follow-up to this would be, because it feels like it would have to be moving away from that aligned continuity, because you have the Maximals and the Predacons on Cybertron.
Yeah. Maybe that's what they want. Maybe that's what they want. They want the Maximals and the Predacons. They want to use them in the same timeline now.
Could be. Because like like I said, I'd love to follow Starscream as he is now. I'd love that. I'd love to explore this concept of the Predacons and Maximals, and trying to help reconstruct what Cybertron is to people.
I don't
but
know.
I have a hard time imagining it.
It feels weird to want to create what was the words? Multiversal singularity.
Multiversal singularity.
It feels weird to kind of make that hard stance that the big bad of every Transformers media is now the same character each time.
Mm-hmm. This is very much an actual in action. The concept that if you listen to our Terminator episode on the Fake Nerd podcast, guys, that I said is the cool way Terminator could have gone after Genesis. Is that the one with
5?
Emilia Clarke?
Yes.
Where it almost seems like Matt Smith's Skynet
is the original,
is a multiversal singularity who has learned from the failures of previous Terminator outings and is each time finding a better way to outsmart them at every turn. Which I in that universe I find super appealing, but mostly because everything else that's interesting with Terminator has been done.
Yeah.
But here, yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about it.
Yeah.
It's also hard for me because like I'm not super attached to the Transformers stuff in a way where I can care that much about it yet.
I'm not. I know, Ben, you were like, no. I'm not as hardcore. No, I guess I just have to see it in practice.
It's not clear. It's really just
weird.
It's so unclear what it means for the future, for the immediate future,
and what it means for everything.
Yeah,
literally, it means.
Is it retroactive?
Yeah,
no idea. I kind of doubt it.
Well, they kill Unicron in the original Transformers continuity.
I assume that Unicron would only be a multiversal singularity from here
on out. Yeah. I think I would agree. Like, again, I like the idea of like he's omnipresent so he can see what they're doing through time, and that's like his plan. But like the multiversal thing for whatever reason is giving me pause.
Right. Yeah, and so like that seems like what the tease is most trying to cue up is because he has this delivery of, you know, let's try something new or different or whatever he says, and that kind of implies like I'll know what's happening, but we're starting again.
Yeah,
and I'm kind of like, I okay. So where I get hung up is that that's fine, but it's not fine if every time he starts again, most elements are the same.
Yes.
Which is what they're also saying is we want to line continuity. Certain things can never change. And I'm like, if certain things can never change, like what's the point of having a character who can constantly go back and change them?
Well, Star Trek had this idea. I guess Star Trek, I'm just musing again. I guess Star Trek had this idea.
Star Trek is a good example, by the way, because they constantly reference the showrunner producer, Michael Murray and FJ DeSanto, that they visualize War for Cybertron as the Abrams Star Trek 09 new timeline thing where like it went back but it changed, created a new path, that kind of thing.
Star Trek has this idea with time travel that certain events have to happen. Yeah. Like the if you change the past, the universe will work a way around to make the thing that's supposed to happen still happen. And I think I always kind of thought that was kind of interesting. But for whatever reason with Transformers, which has the potential to just do different timelines, different continuities, different things with it, that feels really restrictive. Unlike for Star Trek, it feels kind of not necessarily liberating, but like it makes sense for something like Star Trek, but really restrictive for something like Transformers.
I agree. I think a lot of that comes from just feeling like a lot of the Transformers shows, regardless of like, you know, some might be better quality or something than the other, are more or less the same show again.
Yeah.
Optimus leading the Autobots, fighting Megatron, leading the Decepticons,
Bumblebee
stumbling out of the Cybertron war and fighting each other, and they do that. And most of the main beats repeat themselves. They already have been doing that.
Yeah.
So that's why I think I'm just so turned off by the concept, because I'm like, that story literally exists like 9 times in more or less the same fashion.
Yeah.
And this is one of the furthest branches away from it we've gotten. And the idea that we'll just rewind the clock and hit a lot of those beats again, but a little different, is kind of like,
yeah, it's kind of exhausting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's weird. It's a weird way to treat your toy franchise.
There's definitely still more I want to talk about in the trilogy as a whole. I want to real quickly just backtrack. I'm going to just breeze through some of my Earthrise notes in relation to you guys, just so you got
We said everything we needed to say about Earthrise, right, Ben?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
so, Earthrise, terrible title. Awful. God awful. Megatron weighing the cost of Decepticons for his plans by visiting the debilitated ones at Sector 12. More of that is what I wanted in the first season. More of that is frankly what I wanted in the second season. Megatron trying to appeal to Alita that their fighting is pointless when they're facing extinction. I think that's great. Megatron has a great point. He's right. I love him talking to Magnus's deceased head. Boy, was that something I never thought I'd see in a Transformers show.
Right.
Him just like, don't look at me like that, Magnus. And I'm like, oh shit.
That's a severed head.
Yeah. Much like you guys, I love the moment with Decius, the Quintesson, where he gets consensus.
It cuts off his faces.
Decius is Decius is named after a Roman emperor. This is the first time that they've assigned a name like that to a Quintesson.
Right.
That really put into a lock for me where their minds were at, and what I think is actually a more interesting interpretation of Cybertron history, which is that it's just the Roman Empire.
Oh, sure.
And that they were the gladiator class, the Cybertronians, and the Quintessons were the Roman emperors, the wealthy, the ones who sat above. And I'm like, well, that's fairly simple. I really wish that we had stuff in the show that explored that.
But it doesn't feel like it's that simple because it's so
no, because
muddled.
they don't, because they talk out their butts about it in season 1, and then we'll get into it. Cool plan to use the Nebulon space bridge. I guess that's what I thought when I watched it.
I like the idea that you're watching this. You're like, sure, I guess.
I really like the battle to save the Decepticons from being harvested. I thought that was cool. I loved the initial struggle with Scorponok.
Well, yeah, I did too.
Yeah.
Just went a little too long.
Much like you guys, favorite part of it, Megatron injured, Optimus there with him.
You'd like that part.
Admitting he did the wrong thing with the Allspark. Optimus saying he needs him to... you guys didn't touch on this specific line, but Optimus saying that Megatron needs him to be a villain. And I'm like, Optimus, you're kind of pulling the same shtick here, my man. Like, what you doing? Also, one of my favorite line reads in the show was Megatron being like, Elita is dead, I assume. And I'm like, you Megatron.
Oh, how right he was.
So the Skylinks and Tryon thing. Okay. The flashback kind of felt like bullshit out of nowhere just to justify showing Skylinks, which factually is just because they made the toys so he had to be in the show, so they had to find a way to put Skylinks in the show, and I kind of feel that. I don't think it does enough, but part of that is because it's so deeply tied to Optimus's plot, and Optimus's plot sucks, as we've talked about, so I'm like... Also, fun fact, Ben, that is the only reason why you see Dead Optimus Prime in the Dead universe. They wanted to make a toy of Dead Optimus. That's the only reason that it's in there.
Remember that toy I bought you?
Yeah, the one that's hanging up right next to me. So wow, that's the only reason. That's dumb.
You're welcome.
They revealed in the interviews that like we were told that they wanted us to find a way to make Dead Optimus appear in the show so they could make the toy.
I like the idea when the Transformers die, they like decolor.
Yeah, I think that's cool.
I think that's cool.
Really cool Alita versus Shockwave fight. Great. The Quintessons are poorly explored and explained. I agree with you completely on that. God rest ye merry cog.
Oh, yep. Cog.
That's the note I wrote. God rest ye merry cog.
MVP of that 5 minutes.
Of that 5 minutes. And then sucks that the Autobots on Cybertron are given a very unclear death, poorly executed.
I hate that. I hate that so much. I hate that so much. I'm reeling back, Sparkz. I'm reeling back that Alita died practically off screen.
Yeah.
And nobody knew.
I didn't know until Sparkz told me a while ago. I'm like, that is some bull crap.
Yeah.
It's weird. The more we talk about this, it's like, oh yeah, man, this is no.
The thing about Earthrise, that I liked about Earthrise and Kingdom are the lows are low, but some of the highs are pretty high.
Yeah.
I don't want to say all the highs.
Many other a lot of the other, for different reasons and sometimes the same, a lot of those other Transformers podcasts I listen to, they more or less fall in a similar ballpark of generally like disappointed with certain aspects of the show.
Mhm.
Pretty much everybody agrees across the board that Elita 1, Jetfire, Starscream, Dinobot, and Megatron are the true stars of the show.
Yeah, 100%.
Which brings me to like my major thing about the trilogy that I want to definitely hit, which is that I think there was a better show in this that just followed those characters. So more or less following the Decepticons, except when we're following like Dinobot or Starscream when he goes with Black Arachne and them to the Autobots, that kind of thing. Jetfire when he changes sides, fine. Elita 1, I think all the Elita 1 stuff in Earthrise stays. I think there was a better show that followed those characters, and the Autobots were guests who appeared in their confrontations, but we didn't follow Optimus and we didn't follow the Autobots. And they were more like the concepts and ideas of what they were doing were just only as clear to us as they were clear to Megatron,
right?
And those other characters, and we were only as engaged with them. And I think a better version of this show at 6 episodes per season explored those characters more, made me feel like completely connected to all those people on that side. Well, not saying like necessarily I side obviously with the Decepticons because that's who we're watching a lot of, but more just showing like those were the interesting characters. Those were just the interesting characters in the writing of this show.
Yeah.
And favor them and let me make my own opinion about the Autobots. And I probably would have liked Optimus more because when he just shows up and he's like, he's the hero, I'd be like,
freedom is the right of all.
Why would I question it?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I get you.
And I think that the perfect version of this show lies somewhere in making that decision.
So it's so frustrating that like there is a point where Hasbro decided that Optimus Prime toys don't sell anymore, so they killed him for Rodimus.
Yeah,
and then they changed their mind.
Yeah,
and we have been dealing with that for decades, and this is probably the first time where I've ever said maybe that was a mistake.
Yeah.
Because Optimus has to be the hero.
Yeah.
And sometimes Bumblebee does too. Like I know animated, he's like the star.
It just I would watch a version of this whole thing that took out all the Optimus stuff when he's not interacting with those characters.
Oh my god, I just remembered Rodimus was in Hot Rod was in Transformers last night. What a movie.
But if I were to watch this again,
did you forget that too, Ben?
I think I did.
There's a part of me that almost wants to cut like long movies out of these seasons that are just following those characters and just kind of, does that work better?
Mm-hmm.
Because not that I feel like I should butcher the work of the people who made the show. Like they had their reasons for making it the way they did, but like I genuinely throughout the whole trilogy could not care less when the Autobots were the only characters I was following.
Right.
I just never cared about them. I couldn't, like, as a whole, I'm like, what are you guys doing? Like, I don't give a crap. Like, you're not characters.
The most interesting Autobot.
They felt like toy cutouts. I think even more so, they suffered more in Earthrising Kingdom than they did in Siege. At least in Siege, I felt like there was a little bit more of an Autobot presence because half the time, and it's easy to forget this after watching Earthrising Kingdom, half the time the Autobots were questioning Optimus's decisions.
Right.
They were pushing back on things he was saying and doing.
Really, the most interesting Autobot is Bumblebee in the first season.
Well, yes, it's Bumblebee.
And then they're just like, nah, never mind.
Then that's over. Once he gets those Alpha Trion protocols, he's like, Optimus is the best.
Yeah.
And then it's Elita 1 and Jetfire, who are the most interesting Autobots.
Yeah.
I don't know how you guys felt, but like, I just, every time we were following like just Optimus or just Optimus and Bumblebee or I did not feel this way about the Maximals.
Yeah.
I will say I did not feel this way about the Maximals as a whole. I very much enjoyed following most of them.
I agree. I enjoyed following the Maximals. If we're talking about the whole series, all in all, I think the series is clunky.
Yeah,
it's clunky. There's some good moments in it. I like a lot.
There's some great moments.
There's some great moments in it. I like a lot of it. It's the problems are in its wasted potential, and there are times. Now I'm not as strong in my opinions of hating Optimus as you are.
Sure.
There are times where I see the Optimus Prime that they thought they were writing.
Sure.
Every now and then he shows up, and I'm like, there he is. He's gone now. And like that's the parts I like for Optimus.
Mhm.
And I do like some of his arc in Earthrise. I like his art well enough in Earthrise, I'll say. But all in all, like, this is probably the worst version of Optimus I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not even talking about like I needed Peter Cullen to voice him.
No, it's not even about the voice acting.
No, it's just this is the worst written Optimus I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah,
and I
it's
sat
very
through
bad.
five Bayformer movies where he said, "Give me your face," and shot a man and blew a dude's head off point blank.
Yeah,
like that's a better Optimus Prime than what we had in this movie, than the show.
Yeah.
That sucks.
It does. I agree.
Ben, did you want to thoughts on the series?
I think clunky is actually one of the perfect ways to talk about it, because there are some really great highs in this entire series, and the lows really suck. Like Optimus being one of those lows, and Megatron and Starscream eventually becoming the highs. Because
Starscream's so good.
Because it's like, because normally when we see Transformers products, it's like Decepticons bad, Autobots good. You want to root for the Autobots because Decepticons are just there's like, yeah, tyranny, go Megatron, stuff like that. But watching, I don't know. But as I'm watching or talking to you guys, listening to you guys talk about how Optimus really sucks in this one, and I also agree, this is the worst Optimus I've seen, or the worst.
Optimus killed a man. Optimus killed a dude, Kelsey Grammer, in the fourth Transformers film, and I still think that's a better interpretation of Optimus Prime than this show.
I forgot he did that, to be perfectly honest. Actually, let's be real.
He blows up Kelsey Grammer.
I forget a lot of stuff from the fourth and fifth Transformers movies due to reasons, but I mean, earlier when people said this is a jumping on point for Transformers, I don't think it is, and to be honest, I can't tell when is a good jumping on point for Transformers, which is a bit of a bummer because I don't want people to watch this and go, man, Transformers sucks. It's like, yeah, but it's not all that bad.
Can I tell you what I think my honest opinion is on that right now? I think this is a terrible jumping on point for kids. I think this is actually probably a pretty good jumping on point for adults. If you are less familiar with Transformers media, because in many ways, I would argue it's my jumping on point. Like, while I have familiarity and like I've had experience, this is the only Transformers thing that isn't the live action movies that I've watched all the way through.
Sure.
Granted, it helps that it's short, but this is the thing where I've sat there and I'm like, I see more than anything, it's going to drive me to the comics. 100%. I'm going to start reading the comics now. That's a done deal. It's happening because I see in this the parts of Transformers
book club coming up this week.
I see in this the parts in Transformers that I really want to see, that interests me. And it's and I don't know how much Transformers stuff has it, but I know if anything has it, it's the comics.
Yeah.
And it's this concept of like how the war shaped them. This class system that existed before they started fighting, why they rose up, how Megatron and Orion were before, what they meant to each other, why they fight each other. Megatron not just being a one-note bad guy. The Autobots and Decepticons in general not just being one-note heroes and villains. That's the stuff I want out of it. That's the stuff that makes it so hard for me to engage with like more classic or traditional Transformers materials. I myself am too far beyond the simplistic approach to the Transformers battle. And I think that this show does give, and I'll say like even Siege, like even though Siege pisses you off because it's the thing that is almost but not quite.
She's very needy right now.
It's the thing that's almost but not quite perfect, you know? Whereas Earthrise and Kingdom, like, I am living for Megatron's arc. Like, his 3-story arc across this series, I'm so glad I watched that. That makes me so happy to have that connection to this interpretation of Megatron, this interpretation of Starscream. It just sucks that I also had to watch Optimus while I was watching with that material. Like, that's the thing. So it's really hard for me to say this isn't a good jumping on point. I think that really does engage a particular side of Transformers that could get you interested, because it's certainly working for me.
I'll bounce off of that one and agree. I think for adults, I think this is even young adults. I'll even go so far as to say that this is a pretty good jumping on point if you're unfamiliar with the Transformers saga. As far as kids go, I still think Prime is probably your best bet when it comes to jumping in.
I just don't think there's enough. I don't think there's enough humor in this, or enough good work with the heroes.
Very little color too.
And honestly, like, some people say like it's very simple and straightforward and you can follow without knowing a lot about Transformer stuff. And I think for the most part that's true, but I also don't think it's done in a way where it's digestible to a small child.
Right.
I think it's digestible to an adult who wants to think about the things they're saying.
Yeah. And I think when it comes to like Prime, which I decided is probably the best bet for children, Prime is relatively short. It's colorful. It's bright. It's Autobots and Decepticons, classic, and it takes a lot of cues from the Bayformers in the as far as characters go.
Yeah.
And so if those kids, a lot of people have seen those movies, I think it's digestible in that way. Like, oh, I'm familiar with Bumblebee. I'm familiar with Optimus, and then I see this show.
Right.
Whereas this is definitely like, I ancillarily know something about. I'm an adult. I ancillarily know something about the Transformers. This is more along the lines of what I'm kind of craving for as like adult entertainment.
Right.
Yeah, I agree.
RC is awesome in that show, by the way.
RC's pretty great in Prime. I like Prime a lot.
Yeah. If you are a person who's listened to this whole thing and was debating watching the show, I don't know why. But if you were, like, I do recommend trying to watch this for the characters we've mentioned, for Megatron, for Jetfire, for Starscream, for Elita 1, for Dinobot. Those are the characters you're going to be watching for.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess if you get bored of the Optimus and the other character stuff, try skipping it. Maybe it will be better. I at some point in the future, I will probably try to go through this all again, but only watching those characters I'm interested in and just see if it works.
I wonder where their sacred timeline, what's it called? Their actual timeline?
Aligned continuity. Yeah.
I wonder where in their aligned continuity the Dinobots show up.
Yeah. Well,
like
I
Grimlock and them.
Well, I assume. Oh, I see what you're saying. I don't know. I do want to run through some other notes. This all comes from the podcast stuff, and I
want to say because they're not in the show, and I wonder like when they would show up.
Yeah. I'm sure it's at least one of those 15 ending ideas. I want to run through some stuff I gleaned from the podcast listenings, and just get your guys' like feedback on it, because I think it's interesting information, which is why I wrote it down in notes.
Got so many notes in here, guys.
I really, really do. I spent pretty much the amount of hours that it takes to watch all 3 of these seasons. I spent listening to podcasts talking about these 3 seasons, because I clearly was trying to chase a particular dragon where like I needed to get a concept of like what happened behind the scenes of the show. How are people who know more about Transformers reacting to this? Like, where am I on the gauge related to them? And very different, frankly, like just super, super different. Okay, so All Things Transformers podcast constantly talks about needing to watch the show at 1.25 or 1.5 speed so that the voices weren't too slow for them. And I cannot even imagine doing that.
Oh, no way.
I don't agree. They were real sticklers on this point. They really hate that they feel like all the bots, particularly Megatron, talk too slow for them. And I'm like, it's a freaking character choice. Get over it.
I hate
it's a weird impatience thing. I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole of like the speed up thing, but like they were so bothered by the voices, and I'm like, man, I think you guys are just full of poop. Like you're just way too steeped in your own bullshit. Like I thought it was fine. Again, like they were also ones who really hated Predacon Megatron. They were the ones who saying that they need a redub track of him.
It's weird. Y'all are weird. I say that as a podcast that probably has more listens than us.
Oh, absolutely, they do. They have a huge following. Not as huge as Transmissions. If you were going to listen to a podcast all about Transformer stuff, I recommend Transmissions. They are the ones who got the interviews with FJ DeSanto and Michael Murray and Nick Hatt and Tim Sheridan.
Very cool.
I think they did a very good job of being engaged with those guests when they had them on, even though in reviews they would tear down some of the work that they discussed with them. And I thought they did that very well. I thought they were very fair, but like supportive of the work when they were doing the interview, and then in the reviews they were critical.
Okay.
And I thought that was useful. So if you're interested, I do recommend the Transmissions podcast. I do think that their reviews were pretty good. I think that they're a good group of diverse people with different opinions, but who know a lot about Transformers.
A really horny cat trying to get my attention.
So the following notes I'm about to give come from the interviews with showrunner F.J. DeSanto and producer Michael Murray on Transmissions. The Elita 1 on Cybertron stuff from Earthrise was not part of the original conception.
Okay.
It was added as they went, which is a little bit, I think, of the reason it feels a little haphazard in places.
Okay.
Yeah. I like what I mentioned this,
again.
Like, it's not where it's fine when it's with Megatron, but after that, I just don't see the point in being there.
Hasbro had particular intentions of how much they should use Elita 1, and the writing team was constantly pushing against it.
Sure.
And so I feel for them.
Yeah, I get that. She's putting her claws in my leg.
Just shoo her away. Just shoo her.
I need something with actual liquid in it.
Yeah. Had there been more time or episodes, FJ DeSanto mentioned this quite a lot, we likely would have seen Earthrise spend more of the first half favoring the perspective of the Decepticons before flipping the script when Megatron sacrifices bots.
Right.
Okay.
So the first half of Earthrise might have been more sympathetic to the Decepticons, much like what I've talked about, like kind of sharing more in that perspective. They've even talked about, like, ideally, FJ DeSanto said this a lot. The ideal version of the show in his mind was 10 episode seasons, but they couldn't get the money for it.
And there's still filler.
And had there been one, right. And had there been a 10 episode season, we almost certainly would have had an episode that entirely only follows the perspective of Megatron.
I'd love to see that.
Me too. In their minds, this continued to be perceived as a prequel to G1. What I mean by that, when I say that, is that the characters were meant to end up more or less like who they are at the beginning of G1, not necessarily in the same place because circumstances are different, but they're meant to become who they are at the beginning of G1.
I guess I can say that.
I sort of can and sort of can't.
Actually, I can't see that at all.
Yeah.
No, like, that doesn't make any sense. Because Starscream, Megatron... Yeah, Starscream and Megatron end the show
are 100% different.
Very different place than they start G1 in.
Yeah, I think they're very much conceptualizing just the Autobots when they say that.
I guess. It's a little lazy, though.
The history between Elita, Optimus, and Megatron was meant to imply a connection as they followed Trion, and even Elita favoring Megatron at some point in time. This is something they talked openly about. That was an intention in the behind the scenes of the show.
Yeah.
I do think that it comes across. I do wish there was more of it.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Frankly, another thing that they kind of hinted at that I would have loved to have seen was that there would have been a flashback episode to when Alpha Trion was still alive and Ultra Magnus and Orion Pax and Megatronus were all together.
We were
with Elita 1.
We were.
We were never offered the opportunity because it's Hasbro.
Damn it, Hasbro.
They purposely don't mention how long it has been between the end of Siege and opening of Earthrise. It is meant to be a decent amount of time. This is why I said earlier in our discussion that it's supposed to be years.
Right. Okay.
I kind of get that. Again, I wish the show made it more clear because I do think that contributes to Megatron's desperation, makes it feel more achievable because while that is happening, the Autobots are hibernating in space.
Yeah. Still would like to see more of that, though.
They constantly felt like they were struggling to please a fandom that does not like change. Transformers fandom is apparently very notorious for not liking change. This is part of the reason why Hasbro is pushing towards an aligned continuity. Apparently, like the Transformers fandom in their eyes, and from the people who have worked on shows before, FJ DeSanto comes from the Machinima series. And May Cat comes from Cyberverse, which is currently running. She started on season 2. Sorry, they started on season 2. They're constantly struggling against the fandom not liking things being changed, which is, I think, where this aligned continuity concept is coming from.
Guys, it's toys.
They feel the need to maintain the history of Transformers while trying to push something new into it. This is something that they just lamented that is the state of things.
I guess that can be frustrating. I don't necessarily think that Hasbro as a company should be like
Yeah.
succumbing to this idea.
I agree.
I get the impetus though.
FJ DeSanto also said you can't remake G1. He said this.
Well, that's true.
And I sat there and I said, I mean, you could if you wanted to make the characters more full.
Right.
Because I think that Santos also points out that those episodes were made back when television was made for people who thought they would watch them once and never again.
Mm-hmm.
They were not meant to be elaborate. They were not meant to fill out character arcs and things like that. I do think you can remake G1. I think you could remake G1 in a way where you are expanding that story in a massive attempt to make it more than just like a toy commercial.
Oh, sure.
That's
you do it like they did with Thundercats and Voltron.
I do think there's more to be done there.
Yeah.
And I think War for Cybertron has only made it more evident that like there's definitely more that can be said on that timeline. And I do think you can literally just go in and be like, what if we just do that all over again in a new way?
Yeah,
and explore it more. So I don't agree. Me personally, I did not agree when he said you can't remake G1, and I'm like, no, you really can. It's been 40 years.
I kind of understand where you're coming from now. Like the thing is, you know, you look at a lot of those old 80s cartoons. They're toy commercials.
Yeah,
we have seen very successful. Okay, we've seen very good new adaptations of those, such as Thundercats and Voltron. Only one of those was successful. And I think you could do the same thing with Transformers. And I think Transformers has always kind of struggled in this place that it's almost kind of like that's what they need.
Yeah.
They need that. Like the one thing they're not willing to do is the one thing that might get them out of the slump.
They need that looseness to be able to expand away from the restrictive bonds of what G1 has always been.
Yeah.
They need that freedom because freedom is the right of all sentient beings.
I appreciate you.
I appreciate you too. And I agree. I do think I think that is a bad mindset, and that does seem to be Hasbro's mindset. Is you can't touch or remake that stuff.
He-Man,
and I don't agree. I think that you can change, make new what was old. Like, especially like no one who's young now, like in their 10 or younger, is going back and watching G1.
Yeah,
it's not happening. It's just not happening.
I mean, you can do it like you literally can do it like we're going to reimagine G1. You take the premise, you take the characters, and you explore different avenues. You make it more modern.
Yes.
You make new toys. Like you make better toys, and then guess what? And then you get more profits out of that because that's what Hasbro's all about.
If I were to step all the way back to like when we were watching the first trailer for the very first season of War for Cybertron Siege before we saw the show.
Yeah.
I really hoped that it was going to. We talked about this a lot when we did our Siege review. I thought the whole trilogy was going to be literally on Cybertron, the War for Cybertron,
right?
And we were going to get this whole history of it. And in my mind, if that was successful, what I wanted to see was the follow-up series be a new G1. That's what I thought would happen.
Yeah,
that's just what would happen. That's not where we're going, but that is where my mind was at when we were watching that. I'm like, this will be cool. And then once it's done, we can follow off of that.
My mind is reeling with the possibilities of doing something like this. And I've said it before, it's been done successfully and unsuccessfully, but well received. Before with the same types of properties, with these toy properties. And like even Ben, as Ben said, like Ben, they're gonna make G1 Transformers toys till they're dead. Like they've never stopped doing it.
Right.
Which is why they keep going back to those designs. To see those designs in a more modern animation, maybe not even this, maybe still do it 2D. You can do it.
Yeah.
And I honestly think, now that I'm thinking about it, I honestly think that's the one thing the Transformers franchise needs.
Yeah.
To shake this off. To shake off the
new clean slate.
Yeah, new clean slate.
Yeah, I agree.
Like a new continuity.
I'm very much in the same place, but I want a lot of the sensibilities of like how deep you go on the lore.
Yeah.
That was applied to like Megatron, to the class systems, that kind of stuff. Here, that's what I want in that show.
But
just applied as a logic to G1 entirely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very much in that place. And like DeSanto said in his interview, you know, those shows, G1 was not made to be rewatched in the future. That's just not how that show was made. So it's not meant to hold up.
Yeah, physical media was.
So there's definitely room to improve it. Yeah. It is not infallible and untouchable.
I think I buy G1 on TV.
In their
Superman's coming to Blu-ray.
Yeah, I did.
I'm excited.
In their mind, when Megatron and Optimus talk about rising up against the Quintessons, this is the note I told you about before.
I hate this.
It is meant to be metaphorical. Okay, so what I want to explain is this is how DeSantos explains it. He says it is meant to be metaphorical. They were not necessarily the ones that did it. It's meant to be like when we say when we fought in World War II as Americans kind of concept. My problem with that is that they purposefully say that they fought in the pits.
Yes.
Which means that they did rise up because Megatron was a slave at one point. So I'm like, no, that can't work. But this is what DeSantos said in an interview, which really to me just articulates how muddy I think the creators behind this even were, which is
Someone's
where,
not
like,
talking.
while I say,
Someone's not talking to someone.
While Hasbro was like hamstringing certain things, there were also creative issues, I think, on the table because clearly, like, there was no unified mind about the Quintessons, what they rose up against. This is why you have that line in Siege that says the Autobots were the wealthy ones looking down on us. That's how the Decepticons feel, and we're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
But that's never addressed.
And
again.
then in the second season, it's like we rose up against the Quintessons.
We rose up against the Quintessons. And then DeSantos saying, well, that's really meant to be metaphorical. And I'm like, no, it can't be. Megatron and Optimus were slaves.
Yeah. Why would Optimus, if Optimus fought in the pits, why would he be an Autobot if they were the wealthy elite?
Right. So like none of that makes sense. And so that's one of the signs to me that there's just bad creative planning. They lament that they didn't have the opportunity to get audience feedback before the whole thing was locked. So the whole show was written and locked and sent to Japan for animation before the first season aired. So a character like Alita wasn't prioritized because they were told not to. And they're like, certain character paths would have been different. Certain things would have been focused on differently had they known what fan reaction to Siege would have been.
That's what network TV has been thriving on, is that audience feedback. That's why they filmed their back nine.
And again, like this is one of those situations where there very much seems to be a mindset of they wish they had just tried to do 10 episodes of one season, put that out, tested the water, seen how it was, and then gotten to go back and proceed. But that's not the way Hasbro
maybe would have come up with a better name than Earthrise.
Yeah. Hate that name.
I don't get it.
The main reason they killed Alita was when they were scripting the show, they were told to do whatever you want with her, and we're not going to make a toy out of her. This was also the transformation thing. Then the first season dropped and she was good, so they made a toy out of her. But they also planned to kill her in Earthrise because that was still when they were writing season 2. They were told Alita's not going to be a toy. Alita's like don't prioritize her.
We've talked enough about Alita.
Boo.
We've talked enough about Alita.
I just wanted to share that's.
I can make this podcast into the Alita podcast.
Bumblebee was originally not part of the show.
Oh, interesting.
Because of toys, and he was not in the toy line until like the last minute before season 1 was locked in writing.
He's hugely popular.
Yep, but that's
crazy.
That's apparently just a fun fact about how things were. So Hasbro has a really confused control of the continuity due to the other show Cyberverse that's happening is part of what and them wanting to have an aligned continuity. That's the thing that forced the Alpha Trion thing, where he needed to be long dead before the War for Cybertron team was originally holding him in that Ultra Magnus role.
Right.
So that's where that aligned continuity thing really gets like hairy and dingy, and we kind of touched on that before. It's just there were some other things that they talked about, but like that was the prominent example that they gave. You just really feel how like the toy company maybe should hire someone who has story mind to be running story, and they're not. So there's very like toy minded reactionary responses to how to handle story elements.
The thing that bugs me about this, and I told you about this the other night. The other night. I don't know what day it is.
It was last night.
No, it wasn't. It was Monday night. It's Wednesday.
Oh yeah, you're right. It was Monday night.
We were talking about like the new He-Man show. When I mentioned He-Man before, I didn't mean this. I didn't mean Revelations, Master of the Universe. I meant there was a He-Man show in the early 2000s that was a reimagining of He-Man.
There was. Mm-hmm. I remember. I bought the stuff for it.
Yeah. The thing is, Mattel seems to have a very loose grip on their toy franchise. To be fair, He-Man is not as popular as Transformers. It hasn't been consistently popular.
Right.
But there are toys. He-Man has a bunch of toys, and the new Revelation series has toys. But those toys don't dictate what characters were in the show.
Sure.
It was the other way around.
Right.
They made toys based on the characters in the show. And I feel like that's the approach Hasbro needs to make. Because they have so many different Transformers properties. They can make, if Bumblebee's not in the show, well, he's in Cyberverse, so you can make a Bumblebee from Cyberverse.
Right. And I think it's just also really rough when you're sitting there and you're making calls ahead of time, like, no, you can't use this character because we're not going to make a toy. And then you end up changing your mind, but now the story has been kneecapped because of it.
There's a character that's really cool called Windblade, who's in Cyberverse. They were created for the comics initially, and then they've made the jump to. Just thought that was cool.
Yeah. Those are all my main notes, guys. We've gone through a lot. I feel like we really divested a lot. Any final thoughts on Kingdom specifically, or the trilogy as a whole that you guys want to share?
Ben, do you want to go first?
I don't really have any more thoughts. You guys kind of nailed it on the head much better than I probably could have. I mean, like I said, Kingdom was kind of like lukewarm for me. I liked Earthrise a whole lot more. I think Earthrise is my favorite part of the trilogy as a whole. But
I've heard that from a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, stupid title aside, but then when we start talking about all the Megatron and the Starscream stuff that happened in Kingdom, it's like, yeah, that was really cool. This is definitely a show that has very good highs and very bad lows, and it's a roller coaster throughout. I will say.
Go ahead.
I don't know if I would recommend this because originally after we saw Siege, I was like, oh yeah, cool, because I agree with you, Sparkz. When they said War for Cybertron, I thought, oh, cool. It's all going to be off Cybertron. It's all about the war. We're going to get some really nitty-gritty stuff. What do you mean the war is practically over? Yeah. And it's the first episode. Yeah. Where can we go from here?
That was a real wind out of our sails moment when we first started with Siege, which was part of why I was kind of like negative on it to begin with. Mm-hmm. I've definitely come around to being more positive about it as a whole because I appreciate what is working here. I having gone through all the elements with you guys, Kingdom is my favorite of the three. It's my favorite of the three because it has a higher ratio, I think, of the highest highs, even with some lows. Mm-hmm. I think the most amount of highs are in season 3 for me. And despite the lows that are there, those highs are some of the best highs, and they're what really sing for me.
What's your favorite? What's your second favorite? Earthrise.
Honestly, like it's hard to say because I'm basing all my knowledge on Siege off listening to myself talk about it a year ago, rather than like having watched it recently. Probably Earthrise because Siege just so absolutely missed the mark on justifying everything that Optimus and the Autobots were doing through that whole time. And like I remember, and I still feel this way, like when Siege was done, that I felt like I'm on Megatron's side. Like I nothing in the show has warranted the actions Optimus has taken. Yeah. And on the one hand, I'm kind of impressed that the show did that, but like it's kind of sucky that the show tried to tell me that it wasn't.
Yeah, I got you. I think after talking about it, I think Kingdom has become my favorite because I do think I agree with Sparkz that the highs were very high. Starscream, Dinobot, or Black Arachnia even.
Black Arachnia, I love her.
Yeah. I like a lot.
I love the Black Arachnia Starscream Dinobot trio.
Yeah. I really like some of that stuff. So I
Megatron.
All
Megatron.
Yeah, I just think that all in all, I said it. I have nothing really more to say other than it's clunky, and I wish the potential it had was realized.
Me too.
And that's really my final thought on the series.
I think Kingdom got closest.
Yeah.
That's probably why it sits highest for me.
Yeah.
It got closest to hitting the potential of what it had.
Yeah.
That you know, like I think of a lot of those moments, like the Unicron moment. Everything was Starscream in the ending, and I'm like, that's pretty much the best things the show's put out for me.
I might just watch those last 2 episodes again.
Honest to God, it's really good. We didn't touch on it earlier. I forgot about it in my notes, but I think it's really stupid the way the Allspark fights Optimus. I just think it's just bullshit. Without purpose or reason.
Yeah, I agree.
when it's taking on the forms of Ultra Magnus and Elita 1 and just being like, "You're my nemesis," and I'm like, "This means nothing to me."
Yeah, it's weird. It's like you're. Do they know Nemesis Prime? Is whatever.
It's
I don't
not
wanna go
clear.
on for that. No. All right.
Yeah. So, cool. That was a lot.
It was a lot.
War
Yeah.
for Cybertron. I recommend a big chunk of it, and really dislike another chunk of it. Oh, that was one other thing I was going to bring up. Podcasters like All Things Transformers, they really hate that they brought nuance to Megatron.
Yeah.
They're like, I just want him to be, your die Autobots, and I'm like, why? Why do you want that? That's so stupid. Anyway,
What's wrong with that? Getting Megatron character. I mean, I prefer him having character than just be like die Autobots.
I will say, there was a moment where Optimus Prime could have said, "One shall rise, one shall fall," and he didn't. I was pretty upset by it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they never said that.
There was a moment too. There's a perfect moment where he could say it to Megatron, and he doesn't. And I'm like, oh, all right.
What was the moment?
It's fine. It's when they're in the Allspark chamber.
Oh, okay.
Before Optimus
I'm glad they didn't go for that, because it would have just been like, shut the up, Optimus.
I know this Optimus you find really annoying, but I like the line a lot.
I like the line, but I would be like, get the out. That would have been cool.
What if Megatron looked at
Talk
Optimus
about pissing off Transformers fans.
It would have pissed off a lot of Transformers fans, but part of me is like, that
even better.
Been a good flip on the
even
script.
Even better when Starscream's watching Megatron when he's having the standoff with the Autobots, and he's like, "What will you do now, you fool? One shall stand, one shall fall." Like, talking about confronting Megatron, I'd be like, "Holy shit, what a baller move!" Anyway,
but of course, people are like, "There's this line." It's like, it's damn it. Oh well. Anyways,
it would have been just another thing for the Transformers fandom to complain about. Okay, before we depart the station, I just want to say that I am Sparkz Witty, and you can find me at Sparkz Witty on Instagram and Twitter, enjoying some Transformers lore in my free time when I have it right now. Probably in the near future. Probably not right now, but soon. We should probably plug some other things as well. We're part of the Fake Nerd Podcast. We make things, we talk about things. You can definitely find our conversation about Siege somewhere in here. It's probably linked below. I don't know. And Earthrise, which you guys did and I was not a part of, but I made up for it here, obviously.
Boy, did you.
With our runtime. So you can find those if you're interested in that. Brandon and I are also working on getting out some more Animation Station where we're talking about the Adventure Time specials. We'll have that in the nearish future. Basement Arcade is back. Basement Arcade is back as of us recording today with an episode of Phasmophobia, which I did with our other co-host, Ryan Eliopoulos. So that's up. Basement Arcade Pause Menu has an episode coming up in the near future. I know that for sure. Brandon has Conversation. It's new episodes on Thursdays.
Oh, shit.
This week is Ben Magnet. This week might be on Friday or next week.
Maybe next week.
But
because
anyway,
I listened to the most recent episode of a different guy, like Brian something.
Brandon Jacobs.
Yeah, that guy.
So Ben Magnet will be on a episode soon. So
in the future.
Check out Conversation. It's a good talk about fandom stuff. Maybe you want to reach out to Transmissions. Talk about some Transformers stuff.
Hell yeah, I'd love to do that.
Maybe not all things Transformers. I'm not trying to shit on them. I don't think they jive.
If you have a podcast and you want to be on Conversation, hit me up at BT McClure.
You can, of course, find our Fake Nerds Watch. I imagine that's back soon with Marvel's What If. And Brandon, you're also doing Star Trek Lower Decks.
Star Trek Lower Decks with a rotating cast of Just a Little Podcast and Downright Annoyed.
Yes.
And Ben Magnet.
So we got a whole bunch of stuff going on. Fake Nerd Podcast is our flagship show. You can find that here. Usually most Sundays. Our next episode that you're going to be seeing, or whenever this comes out, probably right before, is going to be Suicide Squad, where we're doing the review of the Suicide Squad.
Which I actually get to be on, because I thought I was going to be on that episode.
Ben actually gets to be on it. That's
Transformers book club in that episode.
There's a Transformers book club, Ghostbusters Transformers crossover comic. So if you want to hear us talk about that, go check out that episode. Okay, that'll do it. Like I said, I'm Sparkz Witty. Find me on Instagram and Twitter at Sparkz Witty. Just getting excited about finally reading some Transformers because I have a lot of big hardcovers to read through. Brandon?
I'm a BC McClure on Instagram and Twitter. Yeah, that's pretty much it. We got we got a lot more stuff going on, but we'll see if any of it comes out soon.
All right, sounds good. And Ben?
You could find me wishing I had more money in my bank account to buy more Transformers toys because holy crap, those toys are rad at BenMagnet27 on Instagram and Twitter.
All right, and that'll do it for this episode. So I hope you enjoyed it, and we are departing now.
That's a train, right?
That is a train. That's exactly what your Astro train.
It's a turn.
I could get rid of this giant Transformers note on my phone.